Chapter 1735. Divine Dragon Island. The square in front of the Great Void Temple was completely silent. Countless pairs of eyes fell on the two figures standing in the middle. Jealousy, suspicion, indifference. Even without looking up, Chu Luiyue could clearly feel the hostility in the eyes of the surrounding people. She lifted her eyes slightly and looked at Rong Xiao in front of her. He was sitting cross-legged with a calm expression. It was as if the gazes of the surrounding people could not affect him at all. The broken jade plate was placed in front of him. As for his hand, it was holding onto the skeleton. He waved his wrist gently and the skeleton flew up lightly and floated quietly in front of him. Then, a cluster of golden flames suddenly surged out from Rong Xiao's hand. Boom! The flames were bright and scorching, jumping around happily like fairies. Rong Xiao's mind moved and the cluster of flames flew out from his hand and landed on one end of the skeleton. Seeing this scene, the crowd could not help but become restless. The corners of Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched violently. Burning the skeleton of their clansman in front of the great phoenix dragon, only Rong Xiao would do such a thing. Mao Yang's dignified eyes quickly scanned the crowd. The restless voices quickly calmed down. However, those pairs of eyes that were surging with waves clearly indicated that their hearts were far from as calm as they appeared on the surface. Chu Luiyue's brows twitched slightly and she quickly glanced at Mao Yang, who was sitting at the head of the table. She had long heard that Mao Yang was highly respected in the clan. Today, she saw that he was indeed worthy of his reputation. Although he looked kind and polite, if he did not use ruthless methods, he would not have been able to sit firmly in the position of clan leader. Almost at the instant Chu Luiyue looked over, Mao Yang was acutely aware of this point and directly looked over. The two of them looked at each other. In the silence, there seemed to be an undercurrent surging. Chu Luiyue's lips curled slightly and revealed a polite smile. Then, she calmly looked away. After a short while, the feeling of having a knife on his back disappeared. She heaved a sigh of relief and fixed her eyes on Rong Xiao. The cluster of golden flames burned from one end of the skeleton and gradually spread to the other end. Wherever it passed, the skeleton seemed to become more sparkling and translucent. She could vaguely see a small amount of transparent liquid flowing slowly inside. A majestic aura spread out from the skeleton. A trace of surprise flashed across Chu Luiyue's heart. Although she had only used 2 wing bones when she reconstructed Zi Chen's body, she had basically extracted all the bloodline energy in the skeleton. She had originally thought that she had extracted the purest power of the skeleton's bloodline. But now, it seemed that there was still a remnant of the bloodline power of the skeleton. More importantly, Rong Xiao had so easily dug out the power hidden in every inch of the skeleton. This was something that even Chu Luiyue could not do. Chu Luiyue stared at the burning golden flames. She had always known that the golden flames on Rong Xiao's body were not ordinary, but she had never thought about it carefully before. But now, she suddenly felt a little curious. Because she realized that the power of the flames did not seem to be inferior to hers. After all, she could summon 2 flames. One was the scarlet gold flame of the scarlet gold heavenly phoenix, and the other was the transparent karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron. These 2 flames were extraordinarily powerful, not to mention that they were supported by the power of the transparent water droplet in her body. No, it should be called a zither score. After experiencing those things in the god-slaying mound, she realized that this thing on her was a precious treasure. The golden flames on Rong Xiao's body were not inferior in comparison. Just as Chu Luiyue was thinking about these questions, the golden flames had already burned to the other end of the skeleton. Rong Xiao raised his hand, and the flames silently separated from the skeleton. At the same time, the transparent liquid in the skeleton slowly seeped out and condensed into a ball the size of a longan. This ball was surrounded and roasted by the golden flames. Gradually, a shadow seemed to emerge from it. Chu Luiyue stood closer, so she could see it more clearly than the others. At first, the shadow was just a blurry ball, but gradually, as time passed and the golden flames condensed, the shadow became clearer and clearer. Finally, at a certain moment, the shadow revealed its true appearance. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly. It was actually a dragon. A great phoenix dragon. Although it was very small, Chu Luiyue could tell at first glance that it was indeed a great phoenix dragon. Roar. A deep and deep dragon roar resounded through the world. The pressure was heavy, covering the sky and the earth. Chu Luiyue was shocked. The onlookers were also shocked. They did not expect Rong Xiu to be able to refine the remaining bloodline power. Then, Rong Xiu flicked his finger. The golden flames wrapped around it and quickly pounced on the broken jade disc. The flames were bright. Blazing. It instantly surrounded the jade disc. Almost at the same time, the great phoenix dragon's shadow in the water droplet began to move at an even faster speed. Then, bang! A slight cracking sound could be heard. The water droplet turned into countless tiny water droplets and splashed on the jade disc. It was as if there was an invisible thread that began to string the broken pieces together perfectly. Under the strong and shocking dragon's might, the cracks on the jade disc began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. The golden flames burned even more fiercely. Vaguely, Chu Luiyue saw that the cracks on the jade disc were disappearing. Not long after, Rong Xiu's bony finger tapped lightly. The golden flames flew back instantly. A jade disc floated quietly in the air. All the cracks on it had disappeared. It was as clean as new and flawless. Rong Xiu stood up and kept the jade disc in his hand. Then, he raised his eyes and looked at Mao Yang. He raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled. Clan leader Mao Yang, I did not disappoint you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1736. The entire place was dead silent. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the stiff and cold atmosphere. Impossible. There must be something fishy going on. Rong Xiu glanced sideways with an indifferent expression. Elder Mao Yao, you're not in good health, so you shouldn't be so agitated, right? If you accidentally faint, whose fault is it? Mao Yao was furious. He finally saw through it. These two people were sharper than the other. If he spoke a few more words with them, he might die from anger. Mao Yao took a deep breath and finally realized something. He was no match for the two of them in a war of words. Thus, he stopped arguing with Rong Xiu and turned to look at Mao Yang. Patriarch. Others may not know, but you know it best. That jade disc is a treasure of our clan. Once it shatters, it can't be repaired within an hour. Rong Xiu must have used some kind of trick to make it look as good as new on the surface. You mustn't be fooled by him. Chu Luiyue said with a smile that was not a smile. Oh. Elder Mao Yao, you mean? Patriarch Mao Yang raised this condition to deliberately make things difficult for us? Mao Yao was speechless. You. Enough. Mao Yang stood up, and his voice was finally tinged with anger. He frowned and looked at Mao Yao. Whether it's true or not, I will personally check it. Elder Mao Yao doesn't need to worry about it. He really didn't know what was wrong with Mao Yao. Ever since the failure in Shengguanyu, he seemed to have become impulsive and irritable. He couldn't do anything right, but he was good at spoiling things. Mao Yao also felt as if he was possessed. It was as if as long as those two were involved, he would become irrational and even make mistakes. His situation in the clan was already difficult enough. If this continued, it would be a problem if he could continue to stay in the clan. His face was pale, and he swallowed the rest of his words with an embarrassed expression. Mao Yang looked at Rong Xiu. I wonder if you can let me take a look at this thing? Rong Xiu nodded. Of course. As he spoke, he casually tossed it into the air. The jade disc flew towards Mao Yang. Mao Yang took the item and glanced at Rong Xiu. The young man was dressed in a snow-white robe. His posture was as straight as a pine tree, and his expression was calm and composed. He seemed to be very confident. Mao Yang frowned, and then he looked at the jade disc in his hand and carefully observed it. This was a treasure of their clan. As the clan leader, he was naturally the most familiar with it, The crowd quieted down again. Everyone focused their attention and looked at Mao Yang, waiting for his conclusion. In fact, most people didn't quite believe it. Their thoughts were similar to Mao Yao's. They all felt that Rong Xiu must have used some special method to make it look exactly the same from the outside. Rong Xiu did not seem to care about this. He handed the skeleton to Chu Luyue and said with a smile, "Many thanks you, Chu Luyue took the item and smiled. Her eyes flickered, and there was a fine but bright light in her eyes. In fact, other than providing this skeleton, she did not help him with anything else. In the end, it was Rong Xiu himself who was powerful enough. If it was someone else, it would be difficult to do so. After a while, Mao Yang raised his head and looked at Rong Xiu with a complicated gaze. Everyone's hearts were also in suspense. Clan leader's expression is not very good. I think there's something wrong with that thing. It's all expected. From the beginning to the end, Rong Xiu only used half the time. It's impossible to completely repair the jade disc in such a short time. I want to see if they can still be so calm later." Low murmurs of discussion could be heard from both sides. Rong Xiu did not seem to hear it. With a smile on his lips, he looked at Mao Yang and asked, "Clan leader Mao Yang, how is it?" His voice was low and pleasing to the ear, and it carried a calming force. Mao Yang was silent for a while before he said, "This jade disc has indeed been restored to its original state." As soon as his words fell, everyone was shocked. The huge square was instantly dead silent. Almost everyone's expression froze on their faces. For a moment, they did not know how to react. Clan leader said, it had indeed been restored to its original state. Didn't that mean that Rong Xiu really only used half the time to complete their request? No. How did he do it? Rong Xiu's smile deepened. It's indeed not easy to do this. But fortunately, Yu has the skeleton of a great phoenix dragon. With the help of the great phoenix dragon's bloodline power, repairing the jade disc will naturally be much easier. This jade disc belonged to them in the first place. What else was more suitable than their own bloodline power to do this? All in all I did was transfer the bloodline power and the skeleton to the jade disc. This way, it shouldn't be considered an offense to clan leader Mao Yang, right? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. From the beginning, he had said that he wouldn't damage the skeleton at all. Now, he could be considered to have done what he said. His words caused everyone to fall silent. These words didn't seem to be wrong. Originally, they thought that if Rong Xiu really did something, they could use this against him. However, what he did this time was indeed extremely benevolent, and there was no place to attack. This made people unable to find a reason to scold him even if they wanted to. Mao Yang was actually holding back a bellyful of anger. Although the jade disc had been perfectly restored, he had only wanted to take this opportunity to make things difficult for the two of them. Who would have thought that Rong Xiu would actually do it? Mao Yang only felt as if he had punched cotton, and his entire person was extremely sullen. However, his self-restraint was extremely good. Even if his emotions were surging in his heart, his face was still expressionless. He sighed softly. The holy son of the Yuntian Tower is indeed as powerful as the rumors say. No, it should be said that the outside world still underestimated you. Although this child was young, his thoughts were deep. They had been here for so long, but he couldn't guess Rong Xiu's thoughts at all. Moreover, he faintly felt that Rong Xiu should have other trump cards. This person. I'm afraid it's not easy to deal with. Rong Xiu gladly accepted Mao Yang's insincere praise. You flatter me. In fact, I just wanted to turn today's matter into a small matter, and a small matter into nothing. We damaged this jade disc, so it's only right to repair it and compensate. He paused. Now that the jade disc has been restored, and we have already apologized before, then you, and I can leave now, right? Mao Yang narrowed his eyes. The two of them looked at each other. In an instant, sparks flew. The two sides' strength clashed silently. Mao Yang handed the jade disc to an elder next to him and said slowly, I'm afraid this will be a little difficult. Rong Xiu's eyebrows moved slightly, and the smile on the corner of his lips was stained with a layer of frost. Oh. Digression. The Xiaoxiang coins reward for the first day of New Year's Day has been issued. The list of December's comments and the 3 days of New Year's Day's comments will be announced after the event. Speaking of which, Dumpling and Debeo are so good looking I want to flood the surrounding comment section. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1737. What do you mean, clan leader Mao Yang? Rong Xiu asked faintly. Mao Yang had one hand behind his back, and his expression was still calm and gentle. However, at this moment, in the eyes of Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu, his face became stiff and cold. Don't misunderstand, we definitely didn't mean to cause trouble for you. We're all very happy and gratified that the jade disc has been repaired. It's just that, the matter isn't over yet, so I'm afraid we can't let you two leave for the time being. He raised his chin slightly, and there was a hint of authority in his voice. Other than this jade disc, it's also true that the two of you appeared out of nowhere and interrupted our 1,000 peaks. More importantly, for 10,000 years, no human has ever taken a step into Divine Dragon Island. However, not only did the two of you come today, but you also barged into the Great Void Temple. This debt. I'm afraid we still have to settle it properly. Chu Luiyue suddenly couldn't help but laugh. Mao Yang's eyes darkened. Shengguanyu, what are you laughing at? Halfway through his words, he was suddenly interrupted. He hadn't had such an experience for many years. Therefore, at this moment, Chu Luiyue's laughter made him feel very unhappy. Chu Luiyue blinked. No, I was just thinking that since you didn't want to let us leave so easily from the beginning, then there's no need to say these complicated and lengthy pleasantries, is there? No matter whether Rong Xiu succeeded or failed, they wouldn't let it go. After all, they didn't plan to let Rong Xiu do this from the beginning. Unfortunately, they underestimated Rong Xiu. Therefore, at this time, they could only use such words to forcefully stop them. Mao Yang didn't expect Chu Luiyue to be so straightforward, and finally, his face couldn't hold it anymore. He stared at Chu Luiyue for a while, and then suddenly laughed, but there was no smile on his face. You're in the wrong in this matter. Why now, don't we even have the right to pursue responsibility? Chu Luiyue's smile didn't change, and her eyes curved. Of course. What I mean is, if you have any other conditions, just say them all. Our time is precious, so let's get straight to the point. Mao Yang's hands in his sleeves. He finally realized that Shengguanyu didn't play by the rules. Those things were indeed of no use to her. Rong Xiu, who was at the side, was clearly on her side. These two people. It's really not easy. After thinking of this point, Mao Yang became much more. He pondered for a moment and said, let's not beats. If you want to leave this place, it's simple, erase all memories related to this place. Anything related to the Divine Dragon Island must not be taken out by them. Rong Xiu squinted his eyes. A cold smile appeared on Chu Luiyue's lips. She knew it wouldn't be over so easily. What do you mean, clan leader Mao Yang? Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. These memories belong to us. How do you want to erase them? Mao Yang's expression was indifferent. We have our own ways. You just have to do as we say. Chu Luiyue sneered in her heart. It's easy to say. Isn't this the same as handing our lives over to them? Only a fool would agree. Rong Xiu said, clan leader Mao Yang, we can't agree to your request. Mao Yang had expected such an answer from the two of them. His expression didn't change, and his attitude was firm. Actually, we don't want to do this, but there's really no other way. It's fine if you don't agree. When you think it through and are willing to agree to this condition, we'll let you go. Rong Xiu's aura instantly became dangerous. Clan leader Mao Yang, do you mean that if we don't agree, we'll be trapped here forever? Mao Yang seemed to chuckle. Although the Great Phoenix Dragon clan rarely interacts with the human race, this is not a difficult matter for us. His words didn't hide his arrogance at all. This was the confidence of an ancient divine beast. Divine Dragon Island was their territory. Wasn't it a piece of cake to deal with two humans? If it weren't for the fact that Rongxiu had an extraordinary status in the Divine Ruins world, they wouldn't have wasted so much time and energy. Therefore, to Mao Yang and the people of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan, their actions were already quite restrained and polite. Both sides were in a stalemate. The air was cold and silent. At this moment, a person walked over quickly with a nervous expression, clan leader. Outside Divine Dragon Island, a few humans were approaching. Mao Yang frowned slightly. For this kind of matter, you can just deal with it according to the usual rules. Why do you need to interfere? Under normal circumstances, very few humans would come here. On one hand, they didn't dare to. On the other hand, there were very few people who knew the location of Divine Dragon Island. Occasionally, some people would accidentally come here, and the guards below would basically chase them away. If there were any daring people, they would just kill them. Logically speaking, this kind of matter shouldn't alarm clan leader Mao Yang. The guard who came to report instantly broke out in cold sweat. How could he not know these rules? But the key point was, the people who came this time were not ordinary. Moreover, clan leader, among those people, there seems to be a crimson gold sky phoenix. Mao Yang's expression turned stern. What did you say? Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat when he heard this, and he turned around to look. That description really sounded like, everyone in the square also looked at each other and became restless. It can't be. There's actually a crimson gold sky phoenix so daring to barge into Divine Dragon Island? Could it be that they're courting death? We don't have much contact with them, and we won't easily step into their territory. What's going on today? What's wrong with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? Or, are they deliberately looking for trouble? Everyone was discussing animatedly. Obviously, the arrival of this Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix had caused quite a stir in their hearts. It wasn't fear, but vigilance and suspicion. The two clans had always maintained a delicate balance, and whoever wanted to break it would have to pay a huge price. Mao Yang said in a deep voice, "What's going on? Tell me in detail." That person hurriedly bowed and recounted the matter in detail. Mao Yang and everyone else's expression changed again and again. You're saying that the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix is a little girl? That person lowered his head even more, and his whole body was covered in cold sweat. I'm not sure, but the aura of that girl is undoubtedly that of a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix. How is this possible? The two great ancient divine beasts had to reach adulthood before they could transform into human form. Suddenly, Mao Yang thought of something, and his gaze turned to Chu Luyue. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1738. He recalled that he had indeed received some news before. When Shang Guanyu left the Phoenix God Mountain, he brought a 3 or 4-year-old girl with him. At that time, he had thought about it for a long time, but he still couldn't get an answer. But now, a ridiculous and bold guess appeared in Mao Yang's mind. A look of deep shock flashed across his eyes. Could it be, looks like Dumpling is here? Chu Liuyue's lips curled up slightly. The ones who came with Dumpling should be Taizu, Master, and Father. Their movements were really fast. Chu Liuyue's heart, which was originally hanging in the air, was half relieved. Originally, she was still worried about them. Now that she heard that they were here, she naturally felt more at ease. On second thought, she guessed that Yi Zhao and Elder Yi Yu shouldn't have come together. Otherwise, the Divine Dragon Island would have been in chaos. After all, those two had special identities, so this was the most suitable choice. Hearing Chu Liuyue's words, Mao Yang's heart sank. As expected. That so-called 3 or 4-year-old girl was definitely the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix that Shang Guanyu had contracted. They went to the Phoenix God Mountain. Not only did they not receive any punishment, they even helped the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix transform into a human form. Mao Yang's mind raced, and his face turned gloomy. All these years, he had never heard of a young ancient divine beast that could successfully transform into a human form. How did that little girl do it? The biggest possibility was that the power of her bloodline was extremely powerful. But as for how outstanding it was, even Mao Yang didn't dare to be sure. After all, such a thing had never happened in the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. This made him feel bewildered and aggrieved. At the same time, it also made him even more puzzled. Shang Guanyu was here, but that crimson gold heavenly phoenix and a few other humans came over in such a short period of time. It was very likely that there was a contract between them. But how was that possible? Yi Zhao definitely wouldn't agree. He had always been prejudiced against humans, and he would even despise them if they spoke an extra word. How could he allow his people to maintain a contract with Shang Guanyu? Mao Yang suppressed the many emotions in his heart, but his expression did not change. Are you certain that there is only one crimson gold heavenly phoenix? If someone had secretly followed them here, that person nodded and cautiously said, this subordinate has already investigated carefully. There are no traces or auras of other crimson gold heavenly phoenixes in the vicinity of Divine Dragon Island. Furthermore, she had transformed into the appearance of a little girl. The appearance of the crimson gold celestial phoenix was already enough to shock them. When they saw that she was only 3 or 4 years old, their jaws almost dropped in shock. Only then did he return to report in a fluster. Mao Yang fell silent. Chu Luyue smiled. Clan leader Mao Yang, Dumpling, and the others have personally come to take us back. Are you still not going to let them go? Mao Yang gave her a deep look. Ever since Mao Yao suffered a loss at the hands of this woman, he knew that she was not a simple person. At that time, when he heard that she had left Phoenix Mountain unscathed, he was even more determined. It was just that, only now did he realize that he had still underestimated her. This Shang Guanyu looked very young. Her eyes were clear and clean, and she always had a smile on her face. In fact, she was very thoughtful and had many secrets hidden in her body. I can't underestimate her, Mao Yang thought so and said indifferently, it's their business that they are here. As for whether to let you go, I've already made it very clear just now. You can think about it yourselves. Although his voice was calm, his attitude was very firm. It was obvious that he would not change his previous suggestion. Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes. Mao Yang looked at the person who reported the news. Go back to them and tell them that the clan is holding the 1000 Summit. Everyone is busy and it's not convenient to entertain them. If it had been anyone else from the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan who came rashly, he would not have been so polite. However, the one who came was Shang Guanyu's contracted magical beast. Moreover, she seemed to be very young. If he used force and word got out, outsiders would probably say that he was bullying a child. Therefore, after thinking about it, Mao Yang decided to just shut them out. Yes. After receiving the order, the person quickly left. However, the crowd still had different expressions on their faces. Even Mao Yang did not understand the reason behind this, let alone them. In fact, they really wanted to find out what was going on. Mao Yang raised his hand. Men, please go to 7 Lotus Mountain to rest. I'm afraid you two will have to suffer during this period of time. When you think it through, we can continue the discussion. It's the same. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 tall men walked up from the side. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. They were going to put them under house arrest. Just as she was about to say something, Rong Xiu's finger suddenly brushed across her palm. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. She turned her head to look. Rong Xiu's calm and deep eyes were clear. She could not see anything wrong with them. She swallowed the rest of her words. Rong Xiu looked at Mao Yang and smiled faintly. Then I'll have to impose on you for this period of time. Mao Yang's chest tightened. Rong Xiu did not seem to care about his threats at all. He even wanted to enjoy himself here as a guest. Mao Yang felt a little disgusted. Whether it was Rong Xiu or Shang Guanyu, they gave him a feeling that he could not control them. This made him very unhappy. He snorted coldly. I hope you two can think it through soon. After all, there are still people waiting for you outside. Outside Divine Dragon Island. Dumpling and the others finally found the place after a long journey. At this time, they were standing on a long and seemingly endless coast. In front of them was an endless dark blue sea. There was a huge barrier where the sky and the earth met. The pressure was very strong. Needless to say, that was Divine Dragon Island. Dumpling looked over from time to time. Shangguan Jing and the others looked a little serious. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to get people from Divine Dragon Island. At this time, a figure flew out of the barrier. They were shocked. They immediately became nervous. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1739. When they had just arrived, it was this man who had stopped them. After Nan Su Huai explained his identity and purpose, the man turned around and returned to Divine Dragon Island, saying that he needed to ask for instructions. They didn't expect him to return so quickly. Dumpling glanced behind the man and was disappointed when she didn't see Chu Luiyue. Nan Su Huai and the rest also felt uneasy. The man stopped in the middle of the sea and stood in the air. He looked at them solemnly and then conveyed Mao Yang's words. As soon as she finished her words, Tuanzi was furious. What do you mean by this? You're not letting us in to see, are you? The man glanced at Tuanzi meaningfully and looked her up and down for a long time before he said, "You're still young. Although you're young, you're still a descendant of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Don't you know the rules?" It was already too much for them to appear here, let alone let them in. If it wasn't for the Thousand Summits Summit and the fact that this little girl was very young and was Shangguan Yu's contracted fiend beast, how could the clan leader let them off so easily? I'll give you one last piece of advice. This isn't a place where you can come. Leave quickly. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Dumpling was even angrier. What did you say? She had painstakingly found her way here and was finally about to see Yu. How could these people not let her in? She would never agree to it. Dumpling wanted to say something, but Nan Su Huai suddenly persuaded her. Dumpling, we're here to look for you, not to cause trouble. No matter how much they wanted to see the two of them, the Great Phoenix Dragon clan had already expressed their attitude. If they were to force it, they would lose more than they gained. Even if they joined forces, they wouldn't be able to cause trouble on Divine Dragon Island. Hearing this, Tuanzi finally restrained herself. She wasn't afraid of other things, but she really didn't want to cause trouble for Yu. She stomped her feet angrily and turned her head away angrily. Nan Suwai took a step forward and stood in front of Dumpling, cupping his fists politely. Actually, we didn't come here with any other intentions. Since it's not convenient to disturb them now, then. I wonder if you can reveal if they're safe and sound? As long as we know this, we can leave with peace of mind. Nan Su Huai was the dean of Lingxiao College and had a high status. Now that he spoke politely and courteously, the person opposite him didn't want to offend him and his expression softened. Of course they're fine. They just need to stay in our clan for a while to deal with some matters. When the matter was over, they would leave. Of course, he couldn't reveal the real reason. Nan Suwai furrowed his brows. Just now, when this person urged them to leave, he felt that something was wrong, and now it seemed that it was true. It seemed like Rong Xiao and Shangguan Yu wouldn't be leaving Divine Dragon Island anytime soon. It was obvious that the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race would not let them off so easily if they barged in. There was an 80% chance that they were trapped here. Shangguan Jing suddenly said. If that's the case, let's go first. Tuanzi was just about to say, no, when Shangguan Jing gently patted her hair bun. Dumpling, be good. Dumpling was very smart. She had already sensed that the atmosphere was a little strange. After thinking for a while, she finally pouted and nodded. Then, the few of them bade farewell and turned to leave. However, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race didn't seem to trust them and kept staring at them. After walking for a long distance, the feeling of being spied on finally disappeared. At this time, they were basically far away from Divine Dragon Island. Nan Suwai looked back with a solemn expression. It seems that the two of them aren't in a good situation. For so many years, no human had stepped onto Divine Dragon Island. Now that the two of them suddenly broke in and happened to be at the so-called Thousand Peaks, they were definitely in trouble. Dumpling was anxious and worried. What should we do? Will you and the others be in danger? I saw that the person just now was very fierce. The other people of their race must not be any better. Nan Suwai comforted her. Dumpling, you don't have to worry about this for the time being. Rong Xiao and you, are not ordinary people. Even the great void phoenix dragon race wouldn't dare to act recklessly. Moreover, Rong Xiao was there. Nan Suwai wasn't worried that they would be in danger. He just felt that this matter would be very troublesome. Dumpling heard his calm and determined tone and unconsciously felt more at ease. She nodded as if she understood. Then, she looked in the direction of Divine Dragon Island with hesitation. Then, are we really going to leave like this? She didn't want to leave. She wanted to stay and go to Divine Dragon Island to find Yu. Nan Suwai smiled. Of course we can't leave like this. We just have to change our method. The defense of Divine Dragon Island is already very strong. Now that they are holding the Thousand Peak Summit, it will only be more strict. It's as difficult as ascending to the heavens for them to enter openly. Shengguan Jing frowned. That's right. After this incident, they will only be more vigilant against us. If it were any other place, we might be able to give it a try. But Divine Dragon Island, it's really impossible. He and Nan Suwai were among the top experts in the Divine Ruins world. Although Chu Ning's realm was low, he had an extremely rare indestructible divine body. Dumpling was even more so. She was the young mistress of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. When the few of them worked together, their strength was absolutely indisputable. Ordinary people were no match for them. Even if there were many notorious and dangerous places, they could still enter them. Shengguan Jing originally thought that with Dumpling leading the way, they would definitely be able to find Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao smoothly. When he was sent to the northern region of the primitive desolation, didn't he also survive? But he never expected that the two of them would be sent directly to Divine Dragon Island. This was a huge problem for them. Unless the Great Phoenix Dragon clan took the initiative to release them, otherwise. Dumpling raised her head and looked at them. Even if she was not afraid of anything, she knew that this matter was very troublesome. She pulled Nan Suhuai's clothes. Grandpa Dean, you must have a way, right? Although everyone was very worried about this matter, she always felt that Grandpa Dean seemed to be exceptionally calm and steady. Nan Suhuai was silent for a moment. Now is the time when the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan is most vigilant. It's not suitable for us to take action. Let's wait here for a while and see what happens. This was indeed the most suitable method now. Dumpling nodded. Shengguan Jing's frown deepened. Previously, because of the Great Phoenix Dragon skeleton, Yu could be considered to have formed a grudge with them. This time, I'm afraid they won't let it go so easily. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1740. Of course, the Great Phoenix Dragon and the rest were still brooding over this matter. Especially Mao Yang. He was the clan leader. This matter was like a slap to the face of the entire clan. It had completely humiliated him. Naturally, he had a deep enmity towards Chu Luiyue in his heart. However, he had always been good at disguising himself. Even if he wanted to kill someone, he rarely showed his ferocity. Often, he would take someone's life while chatting. Now, he was treating Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao the same way. After ordering his subordinates to send them off, the Thousand Peak Conference continued. However, the thoughts of many people present had already drifted away. There were 2 extra people on the Divine Dragon Island for no reason. How could they not be concerned? Moreover, although the Thousand Peak Conference was held in a grand manner, there was really nothing shocking about it. It was difficult for everyone to concentrate again. Even Mao Yang, who was sitting at the head of the table, felt a little bored as he looked at the juniors who came up to test their talents and strength. In fact, they roughly knew how strong these people were. The Thousand Peak Conference's test was just a chance for them to compete with each other openly. Mao Yang half leaned on the chair. He could not help but recall the scene that had just happened. Clan leader, clan leader. After an unknown period of time, an elder's voice brought Mao Yang back to his senses. The test is basically over. Do you think it's time to prepare to open the Great Void Temple? Mao Yang's hand knocked on the armrest of the chair. His gaze swept across the people below. The juniors who were participating in the test were now divided into two sides. However, their expressions were poles apart at this moment. On one side, they were full of energy. Most of their faces were filled with excitement and joy. These were the ones who were more outstanding and had met the requirements to enter the Great Void Temple. On the other side, those who looked gloomy and stood with their hands by their sides were obviously those who had been eliminated. Looking at the faces of these juniors, Mao Yang's mood suddenly became a little gloomy. He thought of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix who had transformed into a human form at a young age. Among the people in front of him, even the most outstanding one or two had only transformed into a human form after they had reached adulthood. Compared to that crimson gold heavenly phoenix, the difference was truly too great. Originally, Mao Yang was quite satisfied with them, but when he thought about how the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan actually produced such a peerless genius, he suddenly felt unhappy. Comparisons were odious. This sentence couldn't be more appropriate for the two ancient divine beast clans. With such a genius appearing, the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix clan side actually did not have the slightest bit of news before. This was truly doing great things in silence. However, Mao Yang felt a little better when he recalled that the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix was still maintaining its contract with the Shengguanyu. This kind of thing was extremely taboo for them. It was definitely a huge stain on their reputation. If Shengguanyu was dead, then the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. Mao Yang's eyelids drooped slightly, concealing the emotions in his eyes. When he looked up again, his eyes had already regained their usual calmness. He nodded. Yes, we can start preparing now. On the other side, Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue were escorted to Seven Lotus Mountain. Divine Dragon Island was really an isolated island, but it was very large. The island was covered in lush mountains. This Seven Lotus Mountain was one of them. Among the many beautiful and steep mountain peaks, the Seven Lotus Mountain looked ordinary and unremarkable. There was nothing eye-catching about it. However, as soon as they approached, Chu Luiyue sensed that the barrier around Seven Lotus Mountain seemed to be stronger than the barriers around the other mountains. Seven Lotus Mountain is very quiet. I'll have to trouble the two of you to rest here for a period of time. The two great phoenix dragons in charge of escorting them opened the barrier with cold faces and gestured for them to enter. Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. He followed the good advice and held Chu Luiyue's hand, bringing her in. As soon as the two of them entered, the barrier behind them was sealed again. The clan leader said that the two of you can just tell us when you've thought it through. We'll be waiting here at any time. It was obvious that they were going to be imprisoned. Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly. He did not pay much attention to them and brought Chu Luiyue to the mountainside. Over there was a cave. Almost no one had come to Divine Dragon Island. Other than the Great Void Temple, there were very few houses. Most of the great phoenix dragons preferred to live in caves, and this place was no exception. Chu Luiyue looked around and her eyes finally stopped at the entrance of the cave. The entrance of the cave wasn't particularly big, but from here, it was pitch black inside. It made one's heart turn cold for some reason. Chu Luiyue said. It seems that no one has come to this cave for a long time. There were weeds everywhere, and there was a desolate aura everywhere. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. It's not just this cave. No one has set foot in the entire Seven Lotus Mountain for a long time. Chu Luiyue nodded. She had already noticed earlier that the entire Seven Lotus Peak was deserted, without the slightest sign of life. It was so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat. It seemed that other than the two of them, there was no other life here. Strange, she glanced behind her. This place is not far from the Great Void Temple. Why is it so desolate? From here, she could even see the majestic and solemn Great Void Temple standing at the peak of the mountain. Mao Yang and the others were holding the Thousand Summit in the square in front of the Great Void Temple. Rong Xiu smiled and led her in. It's good that it's quiet. Otherwise, people will come and disturb us. As soon as he finished speaking, his sleeves fluttered. A ball of golden flame flew out and burned in front of the cave entrance. Crackle. The surrounding weeds were quickly burned to ashes. Chu Luiyue saw a wisp of greenish-black smoke floating out of the flame. She frowned. That's something dirty, but it's nothing to worry about. Rong Xiu chuckled and retracted the flame. Chu Luiyue clearly felt that the cave entrance seemed to be different from before. She walked a little closer. This feeling became more and more intense. Rong Xiu took a step forward and walked into the cave. The two of them interlocked their fingers. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips and followed him. Just as she walked in, Chu Luiyue looked around and suddenly saw something. She stopped in her tracks and her pupils constricted. On the mountain wall, there were deep marks. It looked like it was slashed by something sharp, but Chu Luiyue could not figure out what kind of sharp weapon could leave such marks. Until she saw a pool of blood at the side. It was dark red and dried. It had completely seeped into the mountain wall. In an instant, a white light flashed in her heart. It said that an ancestor of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe once went mad during cultivation. He killed 7 of his tribe members in one night. After that, he was imprisoned. After 100 days of torture, he was finally killed and died. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. It seems that this 7 Lotus Peak was the cage that imprisoned him. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1741. Chu Luiyue was taken aback. Something like this happened in the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan? Why haven't I heard of it before? Previously, when she was looking up information related to the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix, she had also looked up a lot of information about the Great Phoenix Dragons and had some understanding of them. However, she had never heard of this before. Rong Xiu smiled and glanced at her. Why would they be willing to let outsiders know about such a scandal? After the incident back then, the Great Phoenix Dragons had spent a lot of effort to seal the news. Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding. That's true. Killing 7 of their own in one night. This kind of thing was definitely a big deal in any clan or sect, let alone the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan, which had always been high and mighty. Chu Luiyue paused and did not ask why Rong Xiu knew about this. He even had a way to know about the earth-shattering battle in the Divine Ruins world, let alone this. Rong Xiu was very resourceful and well-informed. She had already seen this before and was not surprised by it now. She raised her head again and carefully looked at the marks on the mountain wall. The mountain rocks on Divine Dragon Island were different from the rocks in the outside world. They were much harder. To be able to leave these marks on the mountain wall, one could see what kind of power was used back then. These marks were messy, but it was not difficult to see how crazy and miserable the person who was trapped here back then was. Looking at the pool of dark red blood again, Chu Luiyue was even a little shocked. These are things that happened many years ago. Don't worry about it. Rong Xiu's slightly rough fingers gently rubbed against her hand, and he comforted her gently and powerfully. Chu Luiyue nodded. I just feel a little puzzled. Logically speaking, this place should be the forbidden area of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan. Why did they directly put us here? If they wanted to imprison them, which place on Divine Dragon Island would not be more suitable than this place? No wonder this place was so cold and desolate. The people of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe would not want to step into this place unless it was a special situation. Rong Xiu looked at the marks on the mountain wall. A sharp glint flashed in the corner of his eyes. He chuckled. They naturally have their reasons. Then, he took out a pearl. The bright light instantly illuminated the two of them. Chu Luiyue looked inside. The path in the cave was winding and led all the way to the inside. Therefore, standing here, it was pitch black and nothing could be seen. With the illumination of this pearl, it was naturally much better. Rong Xiu looked at her sideways and asked with a smile, "Do you want to go in and take a look?" Chu Luiyue knew very well that the deeper one went, the more dangerous it would be. However, she still nodded without hesitation. Look. Mao Yang clearly had other motives for locking the two of them up here. Instead of waiting passively, it was better to take the initiative to attack. Rong Xiu held her hand tightly. The two of them continued to walk inside. In front of the Great Void Temple. The last person had finally finished his test. Mao Yang sighed in his heart. In the end, there was no one who was particularly outstanding. Now, he could only hope that they would have some good fortune after entering the Great Void Temple. Mao Yang stood up with his usual gentle smile on his face. Even the elder who was sitting closest to him did not notice his thoughts. Everyone followed suit and stood up. Mao Yang looked at the batch of winners and said, "Now, everyone's test is over. The fact that you can stand here proves that you are all favored by the heavens." When he spoke, he was full of energy and had an encouraging smile on his face. It was easy to make these young children happy and excited. However, this is only the beginning. The next trial is the true test you will face at the Thousand Summit this time. Mao Yang paused, and his voice became more dignified. The Great Void Temple will open soon. You all enter in order. Inside the temple, there are the inheritances and treasures of your ancestors. Whether you can obtain the opportunity and improve further depends on this. The square was silent. However, in the eyes of the younger generation, there was unconcealable excitement and impulsiveness. They were well aware of how important this match was to them. If they could really obtain the favor of an ancestor, their future would be limitless. Mao Yang looked around and nodded in satisfaction. You should all know that the people in the clan basically only have this one chance. Once you miss this chance, you won't be able to do it again in the future. So, seize this opportunity, understand? Yes. Many young boys and girls responded, unable to hide their excitement. Mao Yang raised his hand and waved it suddenly. Great Void Temple, open. Rumble. A loud rumble came from the Great Void Temple behind him. All the elders exerted their strength together. Several streams of light danced and intertwined. They surrounded the entire Great Void Temple. Immediately after, a dragon's roar seemed to come from a distant time and space, resounding through the heavens and earth. Creak, the door of the Great Void Temple finally opened slowly. Let's go. The younger generation who could no longer hold back immediately moved and flashed into the Great Void Temple. Their silhouettes quickly disappeared behind the door. At the same time, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu, who were exploring the cave of Seven Lotus Peak, also heard the shocking dragon's roar. Both of them stopped at almost the same time. Chu Luiyue could not help but turn back to take a look. At this time, they had already walked into the depths of the cave. Even if they turned back, they could not see anything. But that dragon's roar was too shocking, causing their blood to boil. Clearly, there was such a distance between them. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. The owner of the dragon's roar was definitely more powerful than Mao Yang. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon Clan was an ancient divine beast born in the chaos, and was on par with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix Clan. No matter what, they could not be ignored. The dragon's roar gradually dissipated, but Chu Luiyue could still feel it lingering in her ears and could not be dismissed. Suddenly, a slight fluctuation came from her body. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Zichen. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1742. Speaking of which, Zichen had been silent for a long time. Even when they encountered such a big change in the god-slaying mound, Zichen did not react. He had always been a man of few words and would not come out unless it was a critical moment. Chu Luiyue had long been used to it. She just did not expect that he would actually make a move at this time. "I'm fine." Sensing her surprise, Zichen replied. His voice was as low and hoarse as ever. However, it was not the first day that Chu Luiyue had met him, and now that they had a contract between them, Zichen's thoughts could not be hidden from Chu Luiyue. "Is it because of the dragon's roar?" Chu Luiyue asked tentatively. Zichen was silent for a moment before he said, "Yes." This answer was simple and direct, but it made Chu Luiyue frown. She pondered for a moment, then suddenly remembered something. Those 2 wing bones. There were 2 wing bones of the great phoenix dragon in Zichen's body. Could it be because of this, so, the dragon's roar came from the first ancestor of the great phoenix dragon? That's why it has such a powerful summoning power. Zichen explained. Chu Luiyue's expression became a little strange. In fact, when Zichen spoke, she had already guessed the reason for the whole thing. There were 2 bones in Zichen's body, and he had fused with the purest power of the entire skeleton. Hearing the call of the ancestor, the bloodline power of the great phoenix dragon buried in Zichen's body fluctuated. It was very simple and easy to figure out. But the point was, what was this? Zichen was the legendary 3-eyed eagle. If he was really related to the ancient divine beast, it should be the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. He had nothing to do with the great phoenix dragon, but now, because he had fused with the bloodline power, he could sense the call of the great phoenix dragon's ancestor. This was simply, Rongxiu narrowed his eyes when he noticed that something was wrong with Chu Luiyue's expression. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. After thinking about it, she decided to tell Rongxiu about it. Although it sounded strange, they were in someone else's territory, so they had to be extra careful. Rongxiu was stunned when he heard that. Immediately after, a faint light seemed to flash through those deep phoenix eyes. At this time, Chu Luiyue was having an incessant headache. He was massaging his temples and did not notice the subtle changes in his expression. "It's just 2 skeletons and a strand of bloodline power. I don't think it'll affect them too much." Rongxiu smiled and comforted. In this world, there are many divine beasts with similar bloodline powers. But in the end, this is different. Chu Luiyue nodded. What she was most worried about was whether things would develop in an unexpected direction. The 2 wing bones and the bloodline power that had fused with Zichen's body were like buried landmines. Chu Luiyue was afraid that they would explode. Of course, this was only her own conjecture. Just as Rongxiu said, Zichen had only fused with these powers, but he was still a legendary 3-eyed eagle after all. It shouldn't affect him too much. Chu Luiyue thought silently. "Zichen, are you sure you're okay?" Chu Luiyue was still worried and asked again. Zichen responded. Chu Luiyue gradually let down her guard. She had spent a lot of effort to help Zichen reconstruct his physical body. She didn't want Zichen to be implicated because of the 2 wing bones. After confirming that Zichen was fine, Chu Luiyue put away her thoughts and continued to move deeper into the cave with Rongxiu. The depth of this cave was far beyond Chu Luiyue's initial estimation. She had thought that this was just an ordinary cave with some twists and turns. But as they walked, she realized that she was too naive. This cave was really deep. No, perhaps it should be said that it was really winding. Walking in this cave, the path was either wide or narrow. Every time they walked a certain distance, there would be a turn. After a long time, it was easy to get lost, and it was even difficult to distinguish the direction. Chu Luiyue didn't have such a problem. She had always been excellent in this aspect. Such a terrain didn't pose a problem for her at all. Thus, she quickly realized that they seemed to be just going around in circles in this area. Chu Luiyue looked around in the light of the pearl. They were already very far from the entrance of the cave, but there seemed to be more claw marks on the mountain walls. In fact, along the way, they had seen these marks on the surrounding mountain walls. From time to time, there were also some dried and ancient bloodstains. Chu Liuyue's expression was calm, but her heart was filled with horror. The great phoenix dragon that had been imprisoned here back then must have gone through excruciating torture before it died. Even today, many years later, this hatred and madness, even hysteria, was still shocking to the core. Chu Liuyue's heart unconsciously became heavy. During this process, within her dantian, Zi Chen's body no longer emitted the same fluctuations as before. The two of them walked in silence. After about an hour, they stopped together. "We were here just now." Chu Liyue came back to her senses and said softly. Rong Xiu nodded. "It seems that person back then was trapped here and couldn't get out." Chu Liyue looked around. They had been walking here for a long time, but they always seemed to be circling. "This is actually an illusion," she muttered softly. When they came in, she didn't notice at all. This illusion was so realistic that it was almost impossible to tell what was real and what was fake. Chu Liyue turned around to take a look. The secluded path was deep and silent. They seemed to be unable to get out. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1743. Outside the Great Void Temple, Mao Yang and the elders of the clan were waiting quietly. Their gazes were fixed on the towering Great Void Temple. The bright sunlight fell on the roof, reflecting a noble and gorgeous light. It was majestic, solemn, and sacred. "I wonder if there will be a few lucky ones this time. Mao Shen is the most outstanding one among the younger generation, right? I can't say for the others, but Mao Shen will definitely succeed." "Hey, how can you be sure about something like a lucky chance? There used to be people who didn't have the best talents, but they got extremely powerful inheritances, right? I think before they come out, it's hard to say what will happen." Everyone discussed in a low voice. The elder next to him looked at Mao Yang and asked with a smile, "Leader, do you think there's anyone you like?" Mao Yang smiled faintly. "They're right. No one can tell what will happen until the last moment." At this time, his attitude was always more conservative. Everyone was used to it and didn't think much of it. Mao Yang looked for a while and suddenly asked, "By the way, have those people outside the Divine Dragon Island left?" The elder hurriedly said, "Just now, the people below reported back that they have already left. You were opening the Taishu Temple at that time, so we didn't have time to tell you." Mao Yang frowned slightly. "That crimson gold heavenly phoenix also left?" The elder nodded affirmatively. "They saw those people leave with their own eyes. Also, I've just asked them to strengthen the patrols and guard. No one is allowed to come close to the Divine Dragon Island." "Don't worry." Mao Yang nodded, but he was a little suspicious. That crimson gold heavenly phoenix was Shengguan Yu's contracted divine beast. How could it just leave like that? According to what Rong Xiu said, the crimson gold heavenly phoenix should have chased after them from the god-slaying tomb. It must have been tough for them to travel thousands of miles. They were sent away just because of this? He paused and said, "Send more people. Send more people to keep a close eye on them. We can't afford to make any mistakes before the Thousand Peak Conference ends." "Yes." Mao Yang's lips moved. He wanted to send someone to investigate the background of the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix and find out what happened during the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix ancestral worship ceremony. But on second thought, he suppressed these thoughts. Now was the most important time for the Thousand Summit, so it was not appropriate for him to take care of these matters. Besides, it was obvious that Yi Zhao had his own plans for keeping the news a secret. If he didn't want anyone to know, no one would be able to find out. At a time like this, there was no need to confront Yi Zhao and the others head-on. At this moment, he caught a glimpse of a figure walking over quickly from the corner of his eyes. He was one of the guards who escorted Rong Xiu and Shengguan Yu. "Greetings, Patriarch." That person walked straight to Mao Yang and bowed respectfully. Mao Yang nodded. "Rise. What about the two of them?" Are there any abnormal reactions? The guard lowered his head and said, "Not at all." Mao Yang's expression changed slightly. "Really?" The guard nodded. After arriving at 7 Lotus Peak, we opened the barrier, and the two of them went straight in without saying anything. "It seems normal." Mao Yang was silent for a moment. 7 Lotus Peak was an extremely special place on Divine Dragon Island. The two of them would definitely sense that something was wrong. But why was there no reaction at all? Countless thoughts flashed through Mao Yang's mind, but his face was calm and gentle as usual. "Then let's continue to watch. If there's anything wrong, report it immediately." "Yes." A day passed in the blink of an eye. Everyone in front of the Temple of Void was still waiting quietly. Suddenly, a wave came from the Temple of Void. Everyone focused their attention on the screen. Then, they saw the door open, and a figure flew out from it. Bang! That person fell heavily to the ground, and there was a trace of pain on his face. Then, the door closed. The whole process was smooth and clean. Many people were disappointed. A white-robed elder standing in front of the main hall looked at the youth lying on the ground and said in a deep voice, "Mao Shang, eliminated." Hearing this, the youth's face showed a trace of unwillingness and shame. He was the first one to be eliminated. Countless gazes fell on him, making him feel as if there were daggers at his back. He gritted his teeth, endured the pain, stood up, bowed in the direction of the Temple of Void, and then left with a gloomy expression. Everyone in the tribe only had one chance in their life to enter the Temple of Void to search for the inheritance. This time, he did not get anything, and in the future, his originally burning hope was suddenly splashed with a bucket of cold water, and no one would feel good about it. Moreover, he was still young and hot-blooded. The square was very quiet. Some people glanced at the youth, and then looked away expressionlessly. This was all too common for them. Generally speaking, this last stage would take the longest time. In this process, those who did not get the inheritance and opportunity would be kicked out one after another. This was just the beginning, and it would take about a month until the end of the journey. Only a day had passed, and there was still a long wait. Mao Yang's expression was gentle. "Go back and cultivate well, and you may have a chance to stand out in the future." The youth's expression became better, and he bowed to Mao Yang gratefully. Although the tribe leader was of noble status, he was always very kind to them, even those who were not good enough. He never looked down on them. This made many people in the tribe respect him even more. Of course, there were a few elders who objected, saying that the great phoenix dragon tribe was an ancient divine beast, and their status should be determined by the power of their bloodline and their true strength. However, Mao Yang was the tribe leader after all, and they did not dare to go overboard. After a few persuasions, seeing that Mao Yang was still the same, they did not mention it again. Mao Yang looked in the direction of 7 Lotus Peak. A day had passed, and there was still no movement from the two of them. "I wonder how the situation is now. How can they be so calm after being locked up in that place?" Mao Yang frowned, but soon returned to normal. He looked away, and once again focused on the Temple of Void. Anyway, there would be a day when they could not hold on. 7 Lotus Peak. Inside the cave, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu sat face to face on the ground. Between the two of them, there was a chessboard outlined with bright lines. On the chessboard, the two of them fought fiercely. After these two people realized that this was an illusion, they didn't want to go out, and directly started playing chess here. Chu Luiyue rested her chin on one hand, and her slender fingers gently tapped on her chin, her eyes fixed on the chessboard. After a moment, her eyes lit up, and she placed another piece. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1744. The two of them were playing chess happily and leisurely. When a person was immersed in something, time always passed very quickly. During this period, Chu Luiyue had been rushing between Phoenix Mountain and the God-slaying tomb. She was very busy. The two of them had almost no time alone. It was even difficult for them to have a proper conversation. Now, they finally had time to sit down and rest. They could even play chess and talk together. Most importantly, no one would disturb them, so they didn't have to worry about life and death. Chu Luiyue felt very relaxed. The Holy Sun was very satisfied. I won. Chu Luiyue's eyes were bright, full of unconcealable joy. Rong Xiu also smiled, with a sense of laziness. You seem to have improved a lot. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Of course. Rong Xiu smiled and shook his head. I mean, after you came out of the god-slaying tomb, you seem to have improved a lot. When she played chess, her moves were obviously different from before. It seemed that she could see more clearly. Chu Luiyue was stunned, and then she began to think seriously. It seems a little. At first, she didn't feel it, but when Rong Xiu said this, she realized that when she played chess with Rong Xiu this time, her thoughts seemed to be clearer and her reactions were faster. It was as if somehow, she naturally knew where to go. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue was stunned. Was it because she had seen tens of thousands of music scores in the god-slaying tomb? After overcoming one music score after another with great difficulty, she felt much more relaxed when she saw these now. Rong Xiu looked at her with a smile. I lost. Princess, do you have any reward? Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and glanced at him. Your Highness, can you be more shameless? It's fine that you won, but now that you've lost, you want a reward? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and readily agreed. Even if there's no reward, there should be some consolation, right? Chu Luiyue. No. As she spoke, she gently waved her hand, and the chess pieces on the chessboard all scattered. One more round. She desperately wanted to know if her guess was right. However, Rong Xiu was not having it. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. I'm too tired to eat anymore. Chu Luiyue was speechless. It had only been a while, and he was already saying that he was tired and didn't want to play anymore. Although this method of chess was indeed quite taxing on one's origin power and spirit, it wasn't believable coming from Rong Xiu's mouth. He was obviously trying to comfort her. After a while, she smiled as well. I didn't expect that after not seeing you for a few years, your Highness' stamina would actually decline so much. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Luiyue felt the surrounding temperature suddenly drop. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows, then suddenly stood up and walked over. As he took a step forward, the chessboard between the two of them dispersed like water ripples, transforming into several streams of light that flew away. The distance between the two of them was extremely close to begin with. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue was sitting, while he was standing, but there was a strong sense of oppression. Then, he bent down. His handsome and devilish face suddenly came close, and his warm breath fell on her face. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly tightened. At this moment, she keenly sensed a trace of danger. Rong Xiu was very close to her. When they spoke, their breaths were intertwined. He seemed to be laughing, and his voice was exceptionally deep and provocative. He reached out his hand and pinched her chin, not allowing her to escape. His slightly rough fingers gently caressed her dark red and tender lips. His breathing suddenly became heavier. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. He leaned closer, slightly tilted his head, and pressed his lips against her white and somewhat transparent ear. In a low voice, he said word by word, "You haven't tried, how would you know?" Half of Chu Luiyue's body went numb. Rong Xiu looked with satisfaction at her white and delicate ear, which was quickly dyed with a layer of crimson. This crimson-red color quickly spread to her slender neck. Her hair was like a waterfall, and her fine black hair hung down, making her skin look even more delicate. With this touch of red, it was more like a fire was lit in Rong Xiu's heart. He suddenly bit her delicate earlobe. Chu Luiyue was startled, subconsciously shrinking her neck, and a soft sound came out of her throat. Sweet and soft. So sweet that his whole body heated up. His syllables were vague, but every word was beating on her heart. Since you won't give it to me, I will take it myself. Outside the boundary of 7 Lotus Peaks, security was tight. One of the guards couldn't help but look back. Silence, desolation. The cave halfway up the mountain, except for the first day when Rong Xiu burned it with fire, there was no other movement. It's been a few days, why haven't they shown any reaction? The patriarch had already specifically asked about it twice. The other guard also looked back and frowned. That's right. This is not an ordinary place, it's 7 Lotus Peaks. Even the clansmen who were locked up here could only last 3 days at most, let alone 2 humans. Ever since Rong Xiu and Shengguan were locked up here, they had been tense and didn't dare to slack off, waiting for them to come out at any time to bow their heads and admit defeat. According to past experience, it wouldn't take too long. But who would have thought that after a few days, everything was still the same as before? It can't be. Could it be that the 2 of them have already fainted inside? So, impossible. If that's the case, they would have been directly sent out, and not like now. There's no sound at all. Both of them fell silent. For now, it seemed that they could only continue to wait. It seems like half of the Temple of Void have been eliminated. One of the guards changed the topic. The other didn't think much of it. Isn't that normal? There are only a few who are really powerful. For those people, the 1,000 Summit is a good opportunity for a meteoric rise, but for the majority of the people, it's just a side run. The competition in the clan was fierce, and this was normal. That's true. The other guard responded and didn't say anything else. Outside Divine Dragon Island. On a barren mountain peak, Dumpling looked at Nan Suhui, blinking her eyes, unable to hide her excitement. Grandpa Dean, will this method really work? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1745. Nan Suhui shook his head. Actually, I can't guarantee that it will succeed. Hearing this, Dumpling's grape-like big eyes flashed with disappointment. However, she quickly became spirited again. She clenched her small fists and said seriously, "Even if there's a glimmer of hope, I still want to try." Nan Suhui stroked her hair. Okay. After saying that, Nan Suhui turned to look at Shengguan Jing. Senior Shengguan, please protect me. Shengguan Jing nodded. In fact, he was also very curious about what method Nan Suhui had to break through the heavy defenses of Divine Dragon Island and contact you, and the others. Shengguan Jing raised his hand, and a palm-sized green iron ring appeared in his palm. This iron ring looked quite old, and there were spots of rust on its edges. One could vaguely see some kind of complicated pattern engraved on it, and it emitted an ancient aura. This is a divine artifact that I made in my early years. It can conceal one's aura and form an extremely powerful barrier. It should be the most suitable for protecting you. As he spoke, he held his breath and concentrated, injecting a strand of force into it. Buzz. Suddenly, a buzzing sound came from the cyan iron hoop. Small fragments of light shone out from the patterns. Shengguan Jing threw his wrist. The green iron ring instantly flew above everyone's heads. It spun rapidly, and a clear and bright white light sprinkled down like a thin veil, forming a hemispherical barrier that enveloped everyone. Nan Suhui calmed down a little. He crossed his legs and raised his arms. Several streams of light flew out from his fingertips and quickly intersected in midair, forming a circular Xian formation. The surrounding space seemed to be affected by this power, and it produced subtle fluctuations. Vaguely, he could even see the fine black spatial rifts in them. The others were all taken aback. This was not a Xian formation, but a teleportation formation. Although these two formations were usually used by Xian masters, there was a huge difference between them. Building a teleportation formation was several times more difficult than drawing a Xian formation. Not only did Xian masters need to have sufficient understanding of Xian formations, they also needed to have sufficient control over space. The slightest bit of carelessness would cause extremely serious consequences. Of course, the people present were not surprised by Nan Su Huai's construction of the teleportation formation. After all, he was a well-deserved top expert. It was not a difficult task for him. Most importantly, why did he choose to take action at this time? After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the teleportation array was finally completed. Dumpling stared blankly at the flickering teleportation array. Grandpa Dean, didn't you say that you wanted to find a way to contact you and the others? Then this teleportation array is. Nan Su Huai patiently explained. The purpose of creating the teleportation formation is naturally to enter the Divine Dragon Island. Shangguan Jing and Chu Ning both looked at Nan Su Huai in unison. They couldn't hide the shock on their faces. So this was his plan. Even Tuanzi felt that something was wrong. She tilted her head and asked curiously, But didn't that person say that he wouldn't let us in? Moreover, they are heavily guarded. From what I can see, there are 2 layers of barriers. This teleportation circle. How do I get in? She had thought that Grandpa Dean meant to wait outside for Yu and the rest to come out. Nan Su Huai chuckled. Won't we be able to contact them if we use this teleportation array? We might even be able to see them directly. That was even better. Chu Ning couldn't help but frown. She asked with a worried expression. Dean Nan, can your teleportation array really avoid the Great Phoenix Dragon's search and directly find you, and the rest? Nan Su Huai laughed. Of course. He heaved a long sigh and looked at the teleportation array solemnly. This teleportation array was created by the first dean of our Lingxiao College. It said that if one can fully comprehend it, even the barriers of the world of divine ruins won't be able to stop them from coming and going. However, only the dean is qualified to learn this teleportation array. I've studied it for several years, but I've only reached the initial level. Although I can't enter and exit the world of divine ruins as I wish, it shouldn't be a problem for me to sneak into the Divine Dragon Island. Shangguan Jing and Chu Ning exchanged a look and saw the shock in each other's eyes. It could ignore the barriers and move freely inside and outside the world of divine ruins. This teleportation array was really powerful. Shangguan Jing sighed. It said that the first dean of your college was a peerless powerhouse and had the ability to reach the heavens. Now it seems that he really lives up to his reputation. Nan Su Huai smiled. There was no doubt about that. There had always been many rumors about that person in the world of divine ruins. However, the true ability of that person back then was more than several times stronger than those rumors. However, this was basically only known to the past deans of the college. There's just one thing. Nan Su Huai's expression suddenly became serious. Once this teleportation array is activated, I need to guard it throughout the entire process, just in case. In other words, I have to stay here. In addition, I'll have to trouble Senior Shangguan to help protect me. Therefore, only Chu Ning and Dumpling could go in. They were all stunned. Chu Ning thought for a moment and shook her head. I'm now a stage 1 warrior. If I follow them in, not only will I not be of any help, I might even drag them down. It's better for me to stay here. He was very clear about his own strength. Although he had the indestructible divine body that ordinary people couldn't have, his resistance to attacks was top-notch, and he could also use the divine domain. But this time, they wanted to secretly enter Divine Dragon Island to find someone. He wouldn't be of any help, so it was better for him to stay. Tuanzi was lighter and more agile when she was alone. Moreover, she had a contract with you, so she was the best person to find someone. Nan Su Huai nodded. In fact, he also thought so in his heart. However, in this case, only Dumpling could go in alone. He was more or less worried. Dumpling, can you do it by yourself? Dumpling was also a little surprised. She originally thought that everyone could go in together. Hearing Nan Su Huai's question, she opened her eyes wide and looked back and forth between them a few times. Finally, she nodded vigorously. Yes. Nan Su Huai looked relieved, but he couldn't help but smile bitterly. If Patriarch Yi Zhao and the others know about this, I don't know how to explain it. Dumpling's identity was too special. If she was just an ordinary divine beast, it would be fine. However, she was the great phoenix dragon's enemy, the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. More importantly, she was the young master. If this was discovered by the great phoenix dragon and the others, it would definitely set off a perilous situation. Dumpling knew what he was worried about. She pursed her lips and said seriously, "Grandpa Dean, don't worry. After I go in, I will be very careful. Once I find Ayu, I will bring them back." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1746. After saying that, Tuanzi lightly jumped onto the teleportation array. Nan Suhui nodded lightly. "Be careful." With that, force surged in his palm. In an instant, light shone brightly. The transportation formation slowly rotated. Soon, Dumpling's figure was swallowed by the light and completely disappeared. On the square in front of the Great Void Temple, everyone was still waiting. A few days had passed, and most of the people who entered had been eliminated. Only the last 5 people were left in the group. Mao Yang's expression was calm, and he did not say a word. The surrounding atmosphere was inexplicably stagnant. It was silent. Everyone was silent, as if they were afraid of disturbing something. Actually, there was a reason why they were like this. None of the people who had been eliminated had obtained any inheritance in the Great Void Temple. This was something that had never happened in the previous Thousand Peak Summit. Although most of the people who had been eliminated early on had obtained nothing, there were occasionally some lucky people who had encountered their own opportunities. Even if the inheritance they obtained was not the best, it was still a good thing. But this time, the people who had gone before had all returned empty-handed. Therefore, although Mao Yang's expression did not change, and he was still as calm as ever, everyone could not help but feel nervous. Given the current situation, unless the 5 people at the back all obtained good inheritances, or at least one of them obtained a top inheritance, the uneasiness in everyone's hearts could be appeased. Some people secretly glanced at Mao Yang from time to time, wanting to see something from his expression. Unfortunately, Mao Yang's thoughts were always hidden deep, and no one could guess them. Suddenly, Mao Yang's brows twitched, and he glanced back. This extremely simple action immediately made many people around him nervous. "Patriarch, what's wrong?" An elder bowed and asked. Mao Yang stared at the void in the distance for a long time before saying, "During this period, has there been anything strange outside the Divine Dragon Island?" Just now, he vaguely sensed that there seemed to be a slight fluctuation in the boundary outside. However, this fluctuation disappeared in an instant, as if it was just his imagination. The elder was stunned, and then hurriedly said, "Patriarch, everything is normal. Ever since you ordered us to strictly guard the boundary, the clan has sent more people to guard it, and we won't let anyone in as they wish." Mao Yang nodded. Even if he didn't say anything, the elders in the clan would be especially vigilant in this regard. However, what was that wave of energy just now? Could it be that he was mistaken? Mao Yang thought for a moment and stood up. "I'll go take a look myself." Everyone around was shocked. The 1000 Summit is still ongoing. How could the Patriarch leave at this time? What they didn't know was that Mao Yang's patience was actually almost worn down. He had been the Patriarch for many years and had experienced the Millennium Summit many times. He was very experienced in this aspect. He knew that even if the remaining 5 people obtained the inheritance, it would be very difficult for them to be compared with the little girl from the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. It was just that he could not say these words in public. Mao Yang lifted his leg and walked over. The people behind him looked at each other. He was the Patriarch, so who would dare to stop him? Moreover, he was going to check the defenses of the Divine Dragon Island. There was absolutely no reason to dissuade him from doing so. A few elders exchanged glances, and one of them followed. Anyway, it was just a look, so it wouldn't waste much time and energy. Bang! The door of the Great Void Temple suddenly opened again. A figure flew out from within. Unlike those who were thrown out in a sorry state, this young man was very calm when he came out. He took a step, his body spun in midair, and landed steadily on the ground. There were a few bloodstains on his body, but it didn't affect the powerful aura surging around him. More importantly, the great phoenix dragon totem between his eyebrows was shining faintly. This was the sign of obtaining the inheritance. And from that reaction, it seemed to be a very good inheritance. The square, which had been silent for a long time, finally became lively again because of the appearance of this young man. Mao Yang smiled when he saw this scene. After hesitating for a moment, he dismissed the idea of personally checking the barrier. This was the first junior to obtain the inheritance. As the patriarch, how could he not be here? Go take a look again. You must guard every corner of the Divine Dragon Island well, he said in a low voice. The elders beside him hurriedly responded. Yes. Mao Yang nodded and walked towards the young man. At this moment, a satisfied and appreciative smile appeared on his face. Well done. The young man also couldn't hide his excitement. The inheritance he obtained this time was indeed of a high level. Even if it wasn't the best, it was still very good. Thank you, Patriarch. Mao Yang nodded and asked a few more questions. The young man respectfully answered them one by one. Mao Yang returned to his seat and began to wait for the remaining 4 to come out. And that small ripple was quickly put aside by him. 7 Lotus Peak. Rong Xiu and Chu Luyue were still playing chess. Of course, this was already a new round. On the chessboard, the two of them fought fiercely, and Chu Luyue had a slight advantage. She stared at the chessboard and didn't move for a long time. Rong Xiu wasn't in a hurry and just waited quietly. Finally, Chu Luyue put down her hand and shook her head. I'm not playing anymore. After repeated investigations, she could now confirm that her strength in this aspect was indeed much stronger than before. In the past, when she played chess with Rong Xiu, she always lost more than she won. Moreover, she had to expend a lot of mental strength every time. But now, this feeling had lessened a lot. After reading the tens of thousands of fake zither scores, her talent as a mystic master had increased by an astonishing amount. One had to know that talent was something that came with being born and was basically unchangeable. Martial artists might be able to use some special methods to increase the grade of their yuan meridians, but mystic masters and celestial physician really couldn't do anything. But now, she was certain that her talent in this aspect had changed. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly, and the corners of his eyes seemed to contain a hint of flirtatiousness. He said lazily and straightforwardly, comfort. Digression, the list of New Year's Day activities and the list of events from last month will be released tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. Chapter 1747. Chu Luyue glared at him angrily. Her starry eyes were bright and her face was flushed red, which made her eyes look even brighter. This look was not threatening at all. Instead, it was like a gentle scratch on Rong Xiu's heart. Soft, sweet, and a little ticklish. He wanted to pull her over, just like last time. Thinking of this, Rong Xiu restrained himself and calmed down. He couldn't think about it anymore. In front of her, he never had any willpower to speak of. Previously, when he pressed her down and wanted to comfort her, he really bullied her. After that, Yu didn't even let him touch her hand. He coaxed her for a few days. Rong Xiu couldn't help but chuckle and rub his eyebrows. Forget it. Anyway, the one who suffers in the end is I. Chu Luyue's face was slightly hot, and the corners of her lips curled up. You reap what you sow, and you ask for trouble. It's referring to people like your highness. Rong Xiu raised a finger and shook it, looking at her with a smile. I don't feel bitter, you is extremely sweet. Chu Luyue, that's why thick-skinned and black-bellied men are always particularly difficult to deal with. Chu Luyue simply gave up fighting with him. In this aspect, she almost never won. She stood up, thought for a while, and then added, "Then your highness can continue to suffer like this. In short, there's no comfort or reward." Rong Xiu's smile deepened. "There's no hurry. After the wedding, I will naturally ask for it all." Chu Luiyue snorted and simply changed the topic. "Then we have to get out of here first." She looked around her. Rong Xiu's pearl illuminated the area around the two of them, but it was empty. No matter whether it was in front or behind, it was pitch black. Only the crazy and mournful marks on the surrounding mountain walls, as well as the ancient bloodstains that appeared occasionally, were particularly eye-catching. "We've been here for quite a long time," Chu Luiyue said and looked at Rong Xiu again. "When do you think it's a good time to leave?" She directly asked about the time, not whether they could leave. Because after entering, she found that Rong Xiu's reaction was very calm. She was inexplicably certain that Rong Xiu definitely knew how to break out of this illusion. Rong Xiu walked over. If there was anyone in this world who understood him and could guess his thoughts, it was only her. Even if he didn't say anything, just a look was more than 1,000 words. The thousand summit is not over. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Rong Xiu was indeed waiting. But why did he wait until the end? End? Just as she was about to continue asking, a familiar wave of energy suddenly came over. She suddenly turned her head. In that deep darkness, a bright light suddenly flashed. This light quickly dispersed into several rays and intertwined with each other. In a moment, a teleportation array was formed. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the teleportation array. Then, a familiar little figure appeared in the glittering light. Dumpling. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes in shock. Who else could it be other than Tuanzi? She was wearing a red and golden lotus leaf dress and had 2 round buns on her head. "Ah, you." Hearing Chu Luiyue's voice, Dumpling, who was still a little dizzy, immediately looked over. When she saw the face that she missed, Dumpling's cheeks flushed red with excitement. She ran over excitedly. "Ah, you. I found you." As she spoke, she threw herself into Chu Luiyue's arms. Chu Luiyue bent down and caught her. The two of them hugged each other tightly. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. Dumpling hugged Chu Luiyue's neck tightly. "Ah, you. I've been looking for you so hard." Ever since she returned to Ah Yu's side, they had never been separated for so long. Hearing her slightly choked voice, Chu Luiyue's heart ached. She patted her back gently. All right. I'm fine now, aren't I? By the way, weren't you stopped outside? How did you get in?" Chu Luiyue let go of Dumpling and looked her up and down carefully. "Have you been discovered? Are you hurt?" Dumpling shook her head. No. I was very careful when I came in. They didn't discover me. And I'm not hurt. With Grandpa Dean around, how could I be hurt?" Chu Luiyue instantly understood. "Did Master specially send you here?" When she saw the teleportation array, she recognized that it was her master's work. However, she didn't expect that it was Dumpling who came. "Where's Taizu and Daddy? Are they outside?" Dumpling nodded. "Yes. They're all with Grandpa Dean." Following that, she briefly recounted what had happened earlier. "So in the end, Grandpa Dean told me to come and find you myself." Originally, Dumpling didn't dare to have too much hope. She was prepared to look for them here. Fortunately, Nan Suhui was very powerful and directly sent her here. After all, Chu Luiyue was his disciple. The master and disciple had a certain level of telepathy between them. To be able to find her directly, one had to have strength and luck. Chu Luiyue's heart was in her mouth. "Dumpling, you really weren't discovered?" After all, Dumpling was a crimson gold celestial phoenix. The great phoenix dragon should be extremely sensitive to her aura. After all, this was Divine Dragon Island. The slightest carelessness would cause great trouble. Therefore, Chu Luiyue was extremely careful. Those people shouldn't have noticed. Otherwise, they would have rushed over by now. Rong Xiu said. Chu Luiyue thought about it and felt that it made sense. For the time being, there was no movement outside. Dumpling held Chu Luiyue's hand, her eyes bright. Ah, let's go now. As long as they left secretly, no one could do anything to them. Chu Luiyue paused, but did not immediately agree. She and Rong Xiu were locked up here by Mao Yang. Mao Yang said that unless they agreed to erase their memories of Divine Dragon Island, he would never let them leave. His attitude was very firm. Even if they left now, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race would not let this matter rest. Moreover, this matter would only get bigger and bigger. During this period of time, she had been thinking about whether she could solve these problems without shedding blood, but she had no answer. Just as her heart was wavering, Rong Xiu said, "We can't leave yet." Chu Luiyue and Dumpling turned to look at him. Tuanzi was at a loss. Why? She had finally found this place. Couldn't they just leave through the teleportation array? Chu Luiyue was more and more certain of her guess. She asked directly, "What do you plan to do after the 1000 Summit?" Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. "If we leave quietly, although we can temporarily escape, there will be endless trouble. The Great Phoenix Dragon clan is very vengeful. If we don't completely solve the problem, there will only be endless trouble. It's better to let them owe us a favor and take the initiative to let us leave." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1748. Chu Luiyue knew that the Great Phoenix Dragon clan was not easy to deal with. This could be seen from the Taizu. For that set of bones, they had chased after the Taizu for thousands of years and had refused to give up. If it were not for the incident in the academy, they would still be pestering her. Of course, this hatred did not disappear. Instead, it was transferred to her. When Mao Yao looked at her, his eyes were full of resentment. She saw it clearly. Even the other members of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan were full of hostility towards her. If possible, she did not want to continue being entangled with them like this. It would be best if she could solve the problem once and for all. Owe them a favor? How? They were now in someone else's territory. It was obviously not very convenient for them to do anything, let alone make the Great Phoenix Dragon clan owe them a favor. Rong Xiu raised his hand and pointed upwards. They have already sent the opportunity to us. There is no reason for us not to take it. Chu Luiyue suddenly thought of something. You mean, their ancestor who went berserk? Rong Xiu nodded and smiled. Although the Great Phoenix Dragon was a sinner in their clan and had a tragic end, he was an extremely top genius when he was alive. The Great Phoenix Dragon clan had even tacitly agreed that he would be the next clan leader. Even Mao Yang could not be compared to him. If those messy things had not happened back then, Mao Yang would not have been the clan leader now. Chu Luiyue was shocked. You mean, that person is of the same generation as Mao Yang? She had always thought that it should be something that happened a long time ago. Mao Yang has been the clan leader for 800 years. That incident happened 1,000 years ago. Rong Xiu said. 1,000 years was not a short time. More importantly, that Great Phoenix Dragon had once obtained an extremely powerful inheritance. Chu Luiyue was slightly taken aback. Inheritance? That's right. All the powerful ancestors of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe would be enshrined in the Great Void Temple after they passed away. These skeletons contained their pure bloodline power, as well as many incantations they had learned when they were alive. If you can obtain its recognition and obtain its power, you will be considered to have obtained its inheritance. Those who can be enshrined in the Great Void Temple and leave behind their legacies are obviously very powerful. However, when they were put together, it was inevitable that there would be a difference in strength. It was said that the Great Void Phoenix Dragon had obtained one of the top 3 inheritances. Rong Xiu paused. In the past 10,000 years, only 2 people have obtained the top 3 successions. It was one of them. Chu Luiyue subconsciously held his breath. From this, it was not difficult to understand how powerful the inheritance was. For the great phoenix dragon to be able to do this, it was clearly extraordinary. How did such a powerful figure end up? Chu Luiyue muttered in a low voice, somewhat puzzled. Rong Xiu smiled. There is often only a step between a genius and a lunatic. So much time has passed, and no one can clearly explain what happened back then. However, the key is that after its death, the inheritance also disappeared. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe spent a lot of manpower and material resources to search for it for a long time, but to no avail. Chu Luiyue suddenly understood something, and a look of shock flashed across his eyes. Could it be that you want to find the inheritance? Rong Xiu's smile deepened. Chu Luiyue's heart was in turmoil. This thing was extremely important to the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe. If this was used as a plan, those matters would be easily solved. However, this matter was easy to say, but it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Even the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe has no clue. How can we find it? Rong Xiu's gaze turned slightly and landed on the mountain wall. A long time had passed, but the traces still showed the madness of back then. He gently raised his hand. In his palm, a pearl the size of a longan suddenly appeared. A small figure of a great void phoenix dragon appeared in it. Chu Luiyue suddenly opened his eyes wide. This is, when I refined the skeleton previously, I left half of the bloodline power. Rong Xiu said with a smile. As expected. Chu Luiyue suddenly understood, and at the same time secretly exclaimed. She didn't even notice when Rong Xiu was doing all this. Mao Yang and the others probably did not know, otherwise they would not have let them leave so easily. To cross the sky and the sea under the other party's nose, only Rong Xiu could do this. Rong Xiu's fingertips moved slightly, and the small ball of light flew to a dark red bloodstain on the mountain wall, and in the blink of an eye, disappeared. The surroundings were silent. A moment later, Chu Luiyue was shocked to see that the color of the bloodstain suddenly turned bright red. Then, the bloodstain began to rapidly condense, and finally, formed a blood bead, suspended in midair. Chi! A cluster of golden flames rose from Rong Xiu's palm. The flames quickly pounced and enveloped the blood bead, forming a blood-red and golden bead. Rong Xiu walked to the side. The bead followed him and soon landed in front of another remaining dark red bloodstain. As if guided by the power of the blood bead, the bloodstain quickly turned bright red, and then transformed into a blood bead and merged with it. Chu Luiyue said, "Are you going to merge all the bloodstains here?" "No." Rong Xiu shook his head, "Only that one." Chu Luiyue instantly understood something. "You mean, besides this, there are other great void phoenix dragons' blood here?" Mao Yang. Zi Chen's voice suddenly sounded. Chu Luiyue was stunned. There are only 2 great void phoenix dragons' blood here. Some of it is that one, and the rest is Mao Yang's. Zi Chen also had a part of the great void phoenix dragon's bloodline power in his body, so he was obviously much more sensitive in this regard. Since he said that it was Mao Yang's blood, it must be right. But the point was, why was there only Mao Yang's blood here? Didn't they say that the one who went berserk was imprisoned here for a period of time and was executed? Was Mao Yang also involved in this matter? Chu Luiyue vaguely felt that there seemed to be a shocking secret buried here. And they were only one step away from this secret. Dumpling was in a hurry to take them away, but after hearing what they said, she felt that it made sense and waited obediently by the side. Inside the cave, there was only silence. Only the blood bead in Rong Xiu's hand became more and more bloody as time passed. Following that, there was a powerful pressure that was faintly discernible. Chu Luiyue could not help but be secretly shocked. Just a few remaining bloodstains, when gathered together, were already so shocking. Then, how powerful was that person back then? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1749. Rong Xiu spent about 2 hours collecting all the bloodstains in the cave. Of course, these were only the blood of the one who was imprisoned here. As for the rest, he did not pay any attention to them. A fist-sized blood bead floated quietly in front of the two of them. An indescribably powerful pressure gradually emanated from it. It was very shocking. The faint glow of the pearl reflected on it, giving it a strange and beautiful dazzling light. Chu Luiyue asked in a low voice. What should we do next? Could it be that the inheritance was left in this blood bead? That seemed unlikely. At this moment, a fluctuation came from Chu Luiyue's dantian. Chu Luiyue was stunned. The fluctuation came from Zichen. A black light flashed in front of him, and a huge black figure appeared in the cave. Zichen. Zichen rarely took the initiative to come out, so Chu Luiyue was very surprised. However, Zichen stared at the blood bead with a grave expression. Did you see something? Chu Luiyue asked. Zichen nodded. This blood bead hides the aura of the great phoenix dragon's ancestor. Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank. Rong Xiu also narrowed his eyes. Zichen quickly explained. Of course, this does not mean that this blood bead belongs to that ancestor. It only means that this blood bead should contain the power of that ancestor. Zichen paused for a moment before he said, if I'm not wrong, this person must have obtained the inheritance of their ancestor. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire cave fell into a dead silence. Chu Luiyue felt that something was wrong when he heard Zichen's first sentence. Now that he heard Zichen's explanation, he was even more shocked. Rong Xiu was silent for a moment, then a playful smile appeared on his face. It said that it obtained an extremely powerful and precious inheritance. I only thought that it was some powerful ancestor. I didn't expect it to be their ancestor. Zichen nodded. It had the power of the great phoenix dragon in its body, so it could not be mistaken. This aura was exactly the same as the pressure from the dragon's roar that they heard when they entered. If that's the case, it'll be even more interesting. The corners of Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly, and there seemed to be waves in his deep phoenix eyes. The great void phoenix dragon has received the inheritance of our ancestor. She is the heir chosen by our ancestor. Her bloodline is the purest. How could she have gone mad? Chu Luiyue subconsciously glanced at Dumpling. That's right. These two ancient divine beast clans were very particular about the power of the bloodline, and they were very protective of their ancestors. Take Dumpling for example. Although her background was ordinary, the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's attitude towards her immediately changed greatly after she received the approval of the ancestors. From full of disdain to full of respect. However, it was because the ancestors had personally chosen her and acknowledged her. How could someone with such a powerful bloodline and the inheritance of their ancestors do such a crazy thing as killing her own clan? It seems that there is a hidden story behind what happened back then. It has received the inheritance of our ancestors. How could no one know about such an important matter? Rong Xiu smiled faintly. It's not necessarily that no one knows. It's just that, the people who know about this matter have buried this secret forever. A light flashed across Chu Luiyue's mind. Mao Yang. It must be him. If that was the case, it was not difficult to explain why there were only 2 bloodstains left in this cave. More importantly, the person who had become the clan leader after the Great Void Phoenix clan was killed was Mao Yang. As the biggest beneficiary of this matter, how could he have nothing to do with it? How could it be clean? The entire Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan, from top to bottom, had probably been completely concealed. But after so many years, how could the people of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan not discover anything fishy at all? This 7 Lotus Mountain, this cave, these bloodstains. Since Zichen could detect these, their clansmen should be able to as well. Rong Xiu seemed to have guessed her thoughts and explained. Naturally, it's because everything here has been tampered with. Do you still remember that before we came in, I set fire to the entrance of the cave and set it on fire? Chu Luiyue nodded. There are some things left behind by Mao Yang. It should be because of this that no one has discovered the secret of this place all these years. This was indeed the most logical explanation. Mao Yang was the clan leader. Naturally, he could do whatever he wanted. He could only let in whoever he wanted. If he did not want to be discovered, who could unravel these secrets? Who would dare to touch the power he had left behind? However, Rong Xiu was different. He had mercilessly attacked the moment he arrived. Coupled with Zi Chen, this secret was naturally exposed. Mao Yang would never have imagined that he had locked them up here to threaten them. In the end, they had unearthed such an old secret. If this matter was exposed, Mao Yang would no longer be the clan leader. Compared to their ancestors, the clan leader was nothing. The entire Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan would probably go on a crusade against him. At this moment, Zi Chen suddenly stepped forward. Step back. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu looked at each other and took a step back. Whoosh! Zi Chen suddenly spread his wings. Then, Chu Luiyue saw a faint glow on his wings. That was the skeleton and power of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon. Then, the blood bead slowly drifted toward Zi Chen. Finally, it split into two and melted into his wings. Rumble. The ground beneath their feet suddenly shook violently. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1750. However, the tremor only lasted for a moment. In the next moment, the sound of something shattering came from the surroundings. Chu Luiyue quickly looked up and saw that the space around them was collapsing rapidly. The illusion was about to break. Rong Xiu immediately rushed over and grabbed her waist. Boom! The void shattered completely. The few of them disappeared from where they stood. At the same time, the flickering teleportation formation in the cave also disappeared quietly. Outside Divine Dragon Island, Nan Su Huai suddenly sensed something. His eyes were filled with shock. Then, half of the teleportation formation dimmed. When Sheng Wanjing and Chu Ning saw this scene, they were both shocked. What's going on? What happened? Sheng Wanjing asked anxiously. Nan Su Huai did not answer his question immediately. Instead, he gritted his teeth and channeled his force into the teleportation formation. However, the dimmed half did not light up again. His back was drenched in cold sweat. Sheng Wanjing and Chu Ning felt uneasy when they saw his expression. Chu Ning asked again. Dean, what's going on? Why did half of the teleportation formation dim out of the blue? Nan Su Huai closed his eyes and said in a deep voice. Half of the teleportation formation is destroyed. Half of it? This is. Chu Ning frowned. His eyes were filled with confusion and confusion. He had never heard of such a thing. However, Sheng Wanjing seemed to have thought of something. His face darkened and was filled with deep worry. Nan Su Huai explained. A normal teleportation formation will collapse completely once it's affected by an external force. However, our teleportation formation is different. Half of it means, the other end of the teleportation formation has been destroyed. Chu Ning reacted. Then, doesn't that mean they won't be able to come back? Nan Su Huai shook his head. Not necessarily. This teleportation formation is different from other teleportation formations. Half of it is destroyed, but the other half is still fine. If they can find a way to repair the other end of the teleportation formation, they can still return safely. His words did not ease Chu Ning's mind. It was easy to say, but how could it be so easy to do? Nan Su Huai had said before that other than the dean, no one else was qualified to learn how to repair the teleportation formation. Then how would you, and the others recover and return? Nan Su Huai knew what Chu Ning was worried about and consoled him. Chu Ning, you has learned about teleportation arrays before. Although she couldn't use it with her current strength, she still had Rong Xiu by her side. If the two of them worked together, there might be hope. Hearing this, Chu Ning finally calmed down. Really? Nan Suhui smiled helplessly. You, is my only disciple. Her talent is exceptional, and I have always regarded her as my successor, teaching her everything I know. Although I haven't formally taught her about the teleportation formation, I've already let her learn some of the relevant content. If she could master it and rebuild the other half of the teleportation formation, she would be able to leave the Divine Dragon Island. Chu Ning let out a long sigh after hearing Nan Suhuai's words. Although this matter was still full of uncertainty, it was still better than having no way out. With Yu Er's intelligence and Rong Xiu's help, perhaps they could really succeed. Sheng Guanjing was thinking about something else. This teleportation formation has been fine all this time. Why is half of it suddenly destroyed? Both Nan Suhui and Chu Ning fell silent for a moment. Needless to say, something must have happened inside. Could it be that Dumpling has been discovered? Or, has she encountered some other trouble? Sheng Guanjing frowned. If that was the case, they would be in big trouble. Nan Suhui suddenly turned around and looked in the direction of the Divine Dragon Island. After a moment, he said in a deep voice. I don't think there's much movement over at the Divine Dragon Island for the time being. Let's wait and see. If something really happened, the Great Phoenix Dragon would definitely send people out to stop them. No matter what, it was better to observe the situation first before making a decision. After serious consideration, Sheng Guanjing and Chu Ning nodded in agreement. Chu Ning sighed softly. Now, we can only hope that they are safe and successful. The commotion in the Seven Lotus Mountain had also attracted the attention of the guards outside. The two guards turned around at the same time. Their faces were filled with unconcealable surprise and excitement. They're finally coming out? Only the heavens knew that they had been guarding here day and night until the flowers had withered. It was really boring. However, these two people had special identities. The patriarch had personally ordered them to guard them strictly. They did not dare to relax at all. Their minds were constantly in a tense state, and they were very tired. If those two people could come out now, they would be liberated. However, after waiting for a long time, no one came out of the cave entrance of the Seven Lotus Mountain. Moreover, the trace of fluctuation that had attracted their attention had completely dissipated. Everything seemed to have returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. The two guards looked at each other. What's going on? Could it be that they were hallucinating? That was not possible. Should we go in and take a look? One of the guards asked. The other glanced at him. The patriarch only told us to guard the Seven Lotus Mountain. He didn't say that we can go in. This place was almost considered a forbidden area for the entire Great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Even if they were allowed to enter, not many Great Phoenix Dragons would want to go in. That's true. What should we do? I think they can't hold on any longer. That's why they're causing such a commotion. I think they'll have to bow their heads and admit defeat in a day or two. So you mean, we should continue to wait? Let's wait. The defense of the Seven Lotus Mountain is extremely strong. They can't escape. What's there to worry about? That's true. They were very confident in the defense of the Seven Lotus Mountain. They did not believe that the humans could fight against them. Moreover, this was their territory. At this moment, they did not know that Rong Xiu and Chu Luyue, who they thought were being tortured, had already left the Seven Lotus Mountain. Chu Luyue and the others were swept into the void. After a long period of darkness, they finally stepped on solid ground again. A faint glow surged in from all directions. After staying in the dark cave for so long, Chu Luyue was still not used to it. She narrowed her eyes and looked around. With one look, she was stunned on the spot. At this moment, they were in a spacious and quaint hall. Black jade stones were neatly laid on the ground. In the middle of the hall, there was a white jade pillar that was as thick as 10 people hugging it. There were cloud patterns carved on it, and a lifelike great phoenix dragon. It was a coiling dragon pillar. A powerful aura emanated from the carved great phoenix dragon. It was frightening. At this moment, it was looking down at them majestically. In an instant, Chu Liyue understood something. This is the Great Void Temple. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1751. Other than them, there was no one else in the main hall. It was so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat. Chu Liyue held her breath. She really did not expect that they would actually come to this place. Just like the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, the Great Void Temple was their most sacred and solemn place, and they could not easily step into it. Even the people of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan had to go through many tests if they wanted to enter, let alone them. At this moment, Chu Liyue suddenly had a very strange feeling in her heart. Recently, she seemed to be quite fated with the two ancient divine beasts. In this short period of time, she first went to the divine Phoenix Mountain and even talked to their ancestor in the Phoenix Temple. And now, she was at the divine Dragon Island. She was originally imprisoned, but who knew that in the blink of an eye, she would be at the Great Void Temple. Chu Liyue looked back and was silent for a moment. Not only did she come with Rong Xiu, but she also brought Dumpling and Zichen. These two, one was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, and the other used the skeleton of the Great Phoenix Dragon to reconstruct her physical body. What a sin. Chu Liyue held her forehead and felt a headache coming on. Looking at the tightly shut door, she began to seriously think about how to leave more conveniently. Outside the door is Mao Yang and the rest. Rong Xiu chuckled. Chu Liyue instantly deflated. Obviously, it was impossible to leave through the door. Windows would not work either. It was obvious that the outside of the Great Void Temple must be full of guards. Unless they went back the way they came, they would really be trapped here. You, look, there's something in the pillar. Dumpling suddenly pulled Chu Liyue's sleeve and said. Chu Liyue turned around and looked. There were indeed 4 purple light spots in the coiling dragon pillar. That should be the Great Phoenix Dragon that entered here to find the inheritance. Rong Xiu explained. He was quite familiar with the Thousand Summit, so he could make a rough guess. Chu Liyue fell into deep thought. So you're saying, there's actually another world within this coiling dragon pillar? Do you see the scales on it? Zichen suddenly said. Each scale contains a succession. Those that are still flickering are the ones that haven't been taken away yet. Chu Liyue suddenly understood. Previously, she had heard from Rong Xiu and Zichen that the inheritance of the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe was passed down from generation to generation. The person who obtained the inheritance would return it to the Great Void Temple after death. The Great Void Phoenix Dragons had entered the coiling dragon pillar to search for the inheritance. At this moment, the eyes of the dragon carved on the white jade pillar suddenly flashed with a ray of light. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately became alert. However, she quickly realized that the pair of eyes weren't looking at her. They were looking at Zichen. Yes. Zichen's body had fused with that person's remnant blood. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, she suddenly felt a strong force wrap around her. Their figures instantly disappeared from where they were. A moment later, a few more spots of light appeared on the coiling dragon pillar. They floated lightly and shone brightly. Outside the Great Void Temple, everyone was still waiting. Ever since the previous youth obtained a decent inheritance, everyone felt more at ease. Waiting didn't seem so unbearable anymore. Mao Yang sat on a chair. The Great Void Temple in front of him was still calm. He thought for a moment, then asked an elder beside him. How's the situation at 7 Lotus Peak? Thinking about it, quite a long time had passed. Logically speaking, the two of them should have figured it out by now. However, there was still no news until now. That elder hurriedly said, Elder, everything is as usual. In fact, the person in charge of guarding would report once a day. Under such circumstances, Mao Yang still took the initiative to ask. It was clear how important this matter was to him. Of course, this was the first time humans had barged into Divine Dragon Island. Not only Mao Yang, but the entire tribe was paying close attention to this matter. Everyone was waiting for an outcome. Of course, in their hearts, there was only one outcome: Rong Xiao and Sheng Guanyu had conceded defeat. None of them had thought of any other possibilities, including Mao Yang. Hearing this reply, his brows quickly furrowed. Something's not right. They could endure a day or two in 7 Lotus Peak, but after such a long time, they still refused to yield. What a stubborn bunch. Mao Yang's gaze turned cold. Then we'll continue to wait. They would wait until they figured it out themselves. Yes. On the other side, Chu Luiyue and the others entered the coiling dragon pillar. Chu Luiyue felt that the scene in front of him kept changing. It was almost impossible to see clearly. Finally, their bodies felt heavy and their feet touched the ground. In front of them was a lush forest. The sound of flowing water could be heard not far away. Chu Luiyue looked over. There seemed to be a lake in the depths of the forest. A faint white mist shrouded the lake, bringing with it a sense of tranquility and serenity. However, alarm bells rang in Chu Luiyue's heart. Almost instinctively, her entire body tensed up and she was on full alert. Rong Xiao held her hand, stepped forward, and shielded her behind him. Dumpling also grabbed her sleeve tightly. Her grape-like eyes widened as she looked straight ahead. Only Zi Chen's eyes flashed with a trace of suspicion. Someone finally found this place. A hoarse and rough voice came from the lake. It was an extremely calm tone, but Chu Luiyue felt that every word was like a clap of thunder. It shocked her to her core. It's really a human? Digression, rolling on the ground begging for tickets la 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 la. Comments: Xiaoxiang coins have been distributed. December peripheral list. Xiaoxiang star comments. Lazy sister Xiaowaluo Yuxian IOQQ star of recommendation votes. Yinyatongla comments star. Listen to the wind and tell me cheeky smile. New Year's 3 days event list. Mo lure memories of Kiani and Yutongla Charlesil Yu Ma is the cutest. Ching Qian's cat. Ambergrease the world's prosperity. The QQ list is posted in the comments section of the bookstore. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1752. Then, Chu Luiyue felt as if a pair of eyes were sweeping across her body. That gaze was clear and sharp, and she had the illusion that she had been seen through 2 humans and a crimson gold heavenly phoenix. There was a hint of shock in that voice. Obviously, it was too strange for Chu Luiyue and the others to appear here. After a moment, that voice laughed again. I was wondering which talented junior had found this place, but it turns out, it's a 3-eyed divine eagle that has fused with the skeleton of a great phoenix dragon. Chu Luiyue's heart tightened. The other party had recognized all of their identities so easily. She was about to speak when Rong Xiao spoke first. We unintentionally barged into this place and disturbed you, senior. Please forgive us. After a short period of silence, the white mist above the lake suddenly gathered. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into the appearance of a middle-aged man. Come forward. His voice was filled with inviolable majesty. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao looked at each other. Zi Chen had already walked forward. Rong Xiao nodded slightly. The two of them followed closely behind. Dumpling grabbed the corner of Chu Luiyue's clothes and followed behind. There was no sun here, but the sky was blue and very bright. The forest was lush and verdant, and there were piles of fallen leaves. When one stepped on them, they would make creaking sounds. A gentle breeze blew over, bringing with it a faint fragrance of plants and trees. Everything looked no different from an ordinary forest. They quickly passed through the forest and arrived at the lake. This was not a very big lake, but the water was still and deep, and there was a faint phosphorescence on the surface of the lake. If one did not look at the illusory figure hanging above the lake, this was really quiet and leisurely. It was a good place to rest. It was a pity that Chu Luiyue could not relax at this point. She knew very well that the person in front of her was a member of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. The closer they got, the clearer they could see. This man looked to be in his 30s or 40s. He was dressed in a long robe, had an ordinary face, and a long beard. At first glance, it seemed very ordinary, nothing special. However, the piercingly cold aura around him clearly indicated that this man was definitely not a simple person. Chu Luiyue even felt that this person was not inferior to Mao Yang. Of course you didn't enter this place by accident. The man smiled. The Divine Dragon Island has never allowed humans to enter. It is definitely not a coincidence that you are here. Chu Luiyue felt a little strange. When the Great Phoenix Dragon and the others saw her and Rongxiu barge into Divine Dragon Island, they were filled with righteous indignation. However, the man in front of her, who was clearly also a Great Phoenix Dragon, did not seem to care about this matter. After all, other than the two of them, there was also Dumpling. How could he tolerate this? There's no need to doubt it. I don't have any intention of welcoming you all. It's just that, this legendary three-eyed eagle and I are fated to meet. For its sake, I won't pursue the matter. Several pairs of eyes looked at Zichen. The man sighed and smiled helplessly. At first, I thought it was a smart junior who had come. Who knew? However, that doesn't matter. The bloodline power of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan flows in your body. You can be considered half a member of our clan. Chu Luiyue's eyelids twitched. This is really casual. As an ancient divine beast, the Great Phoenix Dragon valued its bloodline the most. In their eyes, Zichen was just an anomaly, an existence that tarnished their bloodline. However, why did the person in front of her not seem to think so? Of course, this matter shouldn't be settled like this, but, since you have fused with my blood, I will naturally treat you as one of my own. This sentence was instantly like a handful of water poured into a pot of oil, instantly causing sparks to splatter everywhere. Chu Luiyue raised her eyes in shock and looked at the man in front of her in disbelief. Stormy waves had already set off in her heart. He said. Zichen had fused with his blood? Then his identity was on the verge of being revealed. You are the one who was locked in the Seven Lotus Mountain? Hearing the words, Seven Lotus Mountain, a trace of haze flashed across the man's face. That's right. Rongxiu's eyes flashed slightly, and he immediately cupped his hands and bowed. So it's Senior Mao Zhen. Sorry for the disrespect. Mao Zhen looked at him in surprise. You know my name? Rongxiu's lips curled into a smile. Senior Mao Zhen is a genius of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan that appears once in 10,000 years. Of course, I have heard of your name. Chu Luiyue silently gave His Highness the successor a thumbs up in her heart. This sentence was really good at praising. As expected, Mao Zhen's expression improved a lot, but soon, her eyes dimmed again, and she laughed self-deprecatingly. The glory of the past has long dissipated. Now, I am just a ghost. I have been hiding here for 1,000 years without seeing the light of day. What's the difference between that and death? Chu Luiyue held her breath. Mao Zhen. He was actually still alive. Rumor had it that the legendary figure who had killed 7 people in one night due to chi deviation and was finally executed by the Great Phoenix Dragon was actually hiding in the coiling dragon pillar of the Great Void Temple. Mao Yang and the others would never have thought that he would be hiding here. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows and smiled. You are still alive, and the inheritance of the Great Phoenix Dragon ancestor is still with you. Your identity is naturally different. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Luiyue felt a biting cold murderous intent suddenly attacking. Her heart trembled. However, Rongxiu was calm and composed, so she did not move. Just as the sharp aura was about to cut their bodies, it finally stopped. Mao Zhen looked coldly at Rongxiu. Junior, how dare you? How dare he say such words in front of him? There were no more than 3 people in the world who knew about the inheritance that he had. This kid was so bold. Rong Xiu's expression did not change, and he said indifferently, since we came here with Zichen, it's not difficult to guess this. What's the point of pretending in front of you? That would only make Mao Zhen feel that they were hypocritical and unreliable. Therefore, he might as well be frank with them. Mao Zhen stared at Rong Xiu for a long time, and the coldness on her face gradually faded. You have guts. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1753. That's right, I did leave a clue in the cave of the Seven Lotus Peak, hoping that someone of the younger generation would find this place. But after such a long time, there hasn't been any progress. I didn't have much hope at first, but I didn't expect. Mao Zhen looked at Zichen with a heavy gaze. He really did not expect that a three-eyed godly eagle would appear. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment. Senior Mao Zhen, ever since you left the Seven Lotus Peak, almost no one from the great Phoenix Dragon tribe has gone there. It was a coincidence that we were imprisoned there. After that, she briefly recounted what had happened. Of course, she only said that they came from the Godslayer Mound. She didn't mention what had happened in the Godslayer Mound. Mao Zhen sneered when he heard this. Mao Yang hates me to the core. Of course, he wouldn't allow anyone else to go to the Seven Lotus Peak. That's why he waited here for more than 1,000 years. What happened to you back then? Did it have something to do with clan leader Mao Yang? Chu Luiyue couldn't help but ask. Mao Zhen snorted. Since you've already found this place, you must have guessed it. There's no need for me to hide it from you. He took a deep breath as if to suppress the surging emotions in his heart. That's right. Back then, I was framed by him and ended up like this. He was the one who killed the 7 people and framed me for it. He was also the one who trapped me at the Seven Lotus Peak and tried to steal the power of my bloodline. Unfortunately, he was one step behind and I managed to escape. Even though he had paid a terrible price for it. But in the end, he still survived. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu looked at each other. Although they had already guessed it, it was still shocking to hear the person involved admit it. This was definitely the greatest secret of the great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Then, he didn't know that you were still alive? This was something that Chu Luiyue was very curious about. Since Mao Yang was willing to put in so much effort to deal with Mao Zhen, he must have wanted to kill all of them. All these years, could it be that he really didn't have any doubts at all? Mao Zhen suddenly laughed out loud as if she had heard a joke. His voice was low and coarse, and his laughter was like thunder that struck heavily on one's eardrums, causing one's mind to tremble. Ha ha ha. Aren't you overestimating that Mao Yang and underestimating me, Mao Zhen? Back then, if I hadn't been at the critical juncture of my breakthrough, how could that despicable person have been my match? His words did not conceal his pride and boldness. That confidence was based on absolute strength. Compared to Mao Yang, who was like a smiling tiger, Chu Luiyue admired the person in front of him more. Laughing and cursing, unbridled and flamboyant, magnanimous. Even after being harmed to such an extent, she still had such an imposing manner. It was hard to imagine what kind of giant Mao Zhen would be if those things didn't happen in the past. What a pity. Seeing her expression, Mao Yang raised his eyebrows and continued. After the ancestor died, his body transformed into this world. The inheritances of the clan were all hidden here. Every 1,000-peak summit, the younger generation would enter this place to find their own inheritances. This is the most sacred place in the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan. Even if Mao Yang became the clan leader, he couldn't spy on this place at all. Because of this, I've been here for 1,000 years, but Mao Yang still didn't notice. Rong Xiu suddenly asked. Senior Mao Zhen, the Great Phoenix Dragon clan only has one chance to enter this place in their lifetime, right? You, Mao Zhen laughed. I have the ancestors' inheritance, so I can naturally enter and leave this place at will. Mao Yang thought that I had died and my soul was destroyed, so he couldn't find the ancestors' inheritance. Who would have thought that I was here? So that was it. What kind of expression would Mao Yang have when he found out about this? I'm afraid that he wouldn't be able to keep up the peaceful and hypocritical smile on his face, right? Zichen suddenly said. Then why did you lead me here? Mao Zhen's expression gradually changed. He stared at Zichen. Naturally, to find a suitable descendant for the ancestors' inheritance. The forest was silent. The air seemed to have frozen. After a while, Chu Luiyue came back to his senses and realized the true meaning of Mao Zhen's words. He wanted Zichen to obtain the inheritance of the great phoenix dragon ancestor. Was this a joke? He was a three-eyed eagle. Zichen seemed to have expected him to say this. After a short silence, he said calmly. Senior Mao Zhen, I'm afraid that's not appropriate. I'm the Eagle Lord of the Three-Eyed Eagle clan. There's no reason for me to inherit the inheritance of the great Phoenix Dragon clan. If someone else was here and heard Zichen's words, they would probably scold him for being stupid. The inheritance of the ancient divine beast ancestor. How precious it was. Many demonic beasts in the world yearned for it. Now that it was in front of him, he rejected it. But Zichen really didn't want it. Although he had used the great phoenix dragon's wing bone to reconstruct his body and fused with its bloodline power, he had always remembered his identity. He didn't belong to the great phoenix dragon clan. Not in the past, not in the present, and not in the future. Mao Zhen didn't seem to expect Zichen to answer like this. He frowned subconsciously. Are you sure? Only one person in the world could get such an opportunity. Mao Yang hated him. In order to snatch the inheritance of the ancestor, he did everything he could, but he still got nothing. But this three-eyed eagle said it didn't want it? Zichen nodded. I can return your power. Originally, it had only swallowed the blood bead because it felt that something was calling it, not because it wanted to obtain anything. Mao Zhen's face was a little cold. When he saw that it was the legendary three-eyed eagle that had arrived, his heart was filled with disappointment. But he quickly chose to accept this fact and was prepared to give the inheritance to it. But now, it didn't want it. It really didn't know what was good for it. Zichen's answer was so unexpected that Mao Zhen took a while to digest it completely. He snorted and shouted in a deep voice, I don't have a body now. I don't have a physical body now. What's the use of this inheritance? Waves gradually rose on the surface of the lake, and the surrounding leaves rustled. The world seemed to be restless because of Mao Zhen's anger. However, Zichen was unmoved. His eyes were indifferent. There's one thing that you might not know. Not only am I the Eagle Lord of the Three-Eyed Eagle clan, but I'm also her contracted divine beast. Senior Mao Zhen, do you really not mind? Mao Zhen was shocked and looked at Chu Luiyue. And me. And me. I'm also Yu's contracted divine beast. Dumpling waved its hand proudly and tried to make its presence known. Mao Zhen's eyes widened. What did you say? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1754. At this moment, Mao Zhen was in a mess. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Although the Three-Eyed Eagle clan's bloodline was not comparable to the two ancient divine beasts, it was still considered quite noble. The Eagle Master in front of him was actually willing to form a contract with a human? And the little girl next to it. That was a real crimson gold heavenly phoenix. She was actually willing to give up this face? This was not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that not only did these two divine beasts form contracts with humans, but they also formed contracts with the same person. Didn't he just stay here for a little longer? Why did the outside world become like this? Besides, 1,000 years was nothing compared to the tens of thousands of years that the crimson gold heavenly phoenix and the three-eyed eagle had existed, right? How could? Mao Zhen was in a daze. He looked at Dumpling and Zichen for a while, and his fingers were trembling slightly. You. Dumpling's eyes were bright as she flaunted in a crisp voice. I've been with you for longer than Zichen. Zichen looked back and glanced at her. Dumpling made a face, and her chubby little face was full of pride. Zichen's eyes moved slightly, and he calmly retracted his gaze. Mao Zhen pointed at Dumpling and almost couldn't catch his breath. This. What's there to flaunt about? You're the incomparably noble ancient divine beast, the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Do your clansmen know that you're so happy here? Even if the relationship between the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan and the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix Clan was very subtle, and they habitually disliked each other, Mao Zhen couldn't help but feel heartache for the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix Clan at this moment. How could there be such a weirdo? Not only did she form a contract with a human, but she also served the same master as the three-eyed eagle. Most importantly, she was so happy. Mao Zhen didn't understand. He really didn't understand. When he saw Dumpling previously, he had doubts in his heart. Firstly, he felt that it was quite strange for her to be able to take human form at such a young age. Secondly, she had been tightly tugging on the corner of that human woman's clothes, looking very intimate. It was just that he had been thinking about how to deal with the ancestral inheritance, so he didn't have time to think about it. Who knew this would happen? Chu Luiyue gently rubbed Dumpling's head and smiled at Mao Zhen. Senior Mao Zhen, I'm sorry, but Dumpling is still young and innocent. Don't take her words to heart. Mao Zhen's mouth twitched. Children's words carry no harm. He had lived for so many years and still never knew that this term could actually be used on the crimson gold celestial phoenix. Mao Zhen took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and held her forehead in pain. Even though he didn't have a physical body, he still felt a headache coming on. What kind of people were they waiting for? Right at this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from the forest in the distance. It seemed like someone was heading this way. Mao Zhen's expression turned serious as she glanced in that direction. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu exchanged glances. The person who came should be one of the 4 people who participated in the Thousand Peak Summit and were still here. However, after a while, the footsteps gradually faded away. It seemed that person had left. Soon, the footsteps completely disappeared. It seemed that the person had already left. Chu Luiyue subconsciously looked at Mao Zhen. If that person had come here just now, perhaps he could have obtained their ancestors' inheritance from Mao Zhen. After all, compared to an outsider like Zichen, their own juniors were much more suitable candidates. However, Mao Zhen's expression was calm, as if he was already used to it. Actually, over the years, the Thousand Peak Summit has been held many times, and many good juniors have come every time. A few of them, like the one just now, have found their way here. Mao Zhen suddenly spoke in a much calmer tone. However, none of them have walked through the forest and really come here. Chu Luiyue saw a trace of desolation on his face. In fact, if he thought about it carefully, it was understandable. After all, Mao Zhen was a great phoenix dragon. If possible, he would have wanted to leave this inheritance to an outstanding descendant. As he said, he no longer had a physical body, so there was no point in leaving this inheritance with him. If not for the fact that he really had no other choice, why would he choose Zichen? After experiencing too many disappointments, his hot-bloodedness would eventually cool down. In the battle back then, my physical body was damaged and my strength was exhausted. Although I managed to preserve my life here, I'm attached to this lake and can't leave. In addition, things like opportunities are the most unpredictable and can't be forced. Those children have no fate with me or my ancestors' inheritance. Mao Zhen had already thought about this. Although it was inevitable that he felt regretful, life was not as good as he thought. Even he was the same. He looked at Zichen, and there seemed to be waves in his eyes. These descendants of the clan came here one after another, but they didn't notice my presence. You're not one of us, and you have nothing to do with the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan, but you still came here. Perhaps this was really the will of the heavens. Mao Zhen suddenly paused halfway through. In fact, there was no point in saying these words. Zichen was unwilling to accept this inheritance, and he had already formed a contract with Chu Luiyue. These 2 points were enough to make Mao Zhen give up his initial idea. A forcibly picked melon was not sweet. His only regret was that after today, he still didn't know how long he would have to wait to find a suitable successor. Rong Xiu suddenly said. Senior Mao Zhen, are you really willing to be trapped here forever? Mao Zhen was stunned. Of course he was not willing. He had not avenged Mao Yang. He had not taken back what he had lost. But now he had almost nothing, and it was not easy to find a successor, but it was not suitable. What else could he do? He looked at Rong Xiu in shock. What do you mean? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. Nothing. To be honest, clan leader Mao Yang was very rude to you and me before and made things difficult for us. At the 1000 Summit, he said that if you and I did not erase our memories of coming here, we would be imprisoned on Divine Dragon Island forever. You are the successor of the great Phoenix Dragon ancestor. Whether it is talent or other things, you are better than Mao Yang. As long as the truth is clarified, the position of clan leader will definitely change. At that time, you will be able to take back what belongs to you, and we will be able to leave Divine Dragon Island openly. Why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Mao Zhen narrowed his eyes. You want to form an alliance with me? Rong Xiu smiled frankly. If we can be on good terms with you, it will be our honor. Mao Zhen closed his eyes. Countless scenes of the past surged out from the depths of his mind. After a long time, he said in a deep voice. I don't have a physical body. If I leave here, my soul will be destroyed. Rong Xiu asked. What if we can help you reconstruct your physical body? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1755. Outside the Great Void Temple, the crowd was still waiting. More than 20 days had passed, and there was still one person inside who hadn't come out. Mao Yang sat on his chair with a faint smile on his face. The atmosphere in the square was also very lively. This was because the 3 people who came out not long ago had also obtained very good inheritances. Including the one who came out first, 4 of the 5 people who stayed behind had already obtained very good results. Of course, everyone was relieved. As long as the last person did not make any mistakes and successfully obtained the inheritance, the 1000 Peak Gathering would end smoothly. Although it was not as good as the previous 1000 Peaks Gathering, it was much better than the situation that everyone was worried about. Most of the people in the square were relaxed and happy. They were chatting in groups of 3 to 5. It's been so long, and Mao Su still hasn't come out. He must have obtained a top inheritance. I think so too. In the previous 1000 Peaks Gathering, the last person to come out was basically the most outstanding. This time, Mao Su is no exception. In comparison, Mao Shang, who was the first to obtain the inheritance, is not that outstanding. Suddenly, someone snorted in a strange tone. That's not necessarily true. The crowd was silent for a moment. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance and an unhappy expression. Whether or not one can obtain a good inheritance in the Great Void Temple does affect one's future to a large extent. But that is not absolute. Some people are destined to become strong. Even if they don't perform well once, they will definitely become strong in the future. There are also people who may be in the limelight for a while, but the final outcome is uncertain. Many people secretly exchanged glances. They were all from the same clan, so of course, they were familiar with each other. This man was Mao Shang's biological father. He had been very happy and proud when Mao Shang obtained the inheritance. Hearing these words now, of course, he felt very irritated. Don't forget that our clan leader was not the last to come out, but now, he snorted and did not continue speaking. But the meaning of his words was clear to everyone. Some people's expressions changed slightly, and they subconsciously looked at Mao Yang. Actually, there was nothing wrong with what he said, but the point was, back then, clan leader Mao Yang had participated in the same Thousand Peaks gathering as that person, and they had also entered the Great Void Temple together. Most importantly, that person was the last to come out of the Thousand Peaks gathering. Mao Zhen. This name had become a taboo in the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race. Everyone subconsciously ignored this name, as if that person had never existed. Even some matters related to him were extremely sensitive and would not be brought up. Now that the patriarch heard this, seemingly sensing that the atmosphere was a little strange, the person who spoke was suddenly startled. Immediately, he looked at Mao Yang with some uneasiness. Mao Yang looked over and smiled faintly. Well said. No one knows who will emerge victorious until the very end. The one who had the last laugh was the true powerhouse. Everyone nodded in agreement. No one was more qualified than Mao Yang to say this. Back then, Mao Zhen was extremely talented and she was the undisputed number one among the younger generation of the Great Phoenix Dragon race. At that time, all of his peers were enveloped by his halo. Even Mao Yang was the same. But who would have thought that so many things would happen later on? This small ripple quickly calmed down, and everyone quickly moved on to other topics. Mao Yang leaned back in his chair and retracted his gaze, his eyelids drooping slightly. Mao Zhen, even though that person had been dead for thousands of years, he could not help but be filled with disgust and jealousy when he thought of this name again. For many years, he had lived in Mao Zhen's shadow. When it came to geniuses, successors, and the future, the first person the entire race would mention was definitely Mao Zhen. But he, Mao Yang, was not even remembered by name. He had lived such a life for too long, and he had had enough. Fortunately, in the end, Mao Zhen died and the position of patriarch became his. Everyone gradually forgot about that person and regarded him as the highest, competing to chase after him. Everything went according to his plan, except for one thing. Until now, he had not found the ancestors' inheritance. He had always been brooding about this. In fact, the inheritance he had obtained back then was not bad, but it was a pity that compared to Mao Zhen's inheritance, it was worlds apart. After all, in the entire Great Phoenix Dragon race, only Mao Zhen alone had obtained the ancestors' inheritance in 10,000 years. Of course, Mao Yang was very jealous. In order to obtain this, he had used almost all means. Unfortunately, Mao Yang collected his thoughts, raised his eyes, and looked at the Great Void Temple in front of him. Perhaps, after the 1000th summit ended, he should personally make a trip to Seven Lotus Mountain. The Great Phoenix Dragon is an ancient divine beast. Once its physical body is damaged, it cannot be recovered. Even the Great Phoenix Dragon race can't solve this problem. You're just a human. Where did you get the courage to say that you can help me reconstruct my physical body? After Rong Xiu finished his sentence, the entire place fell silent. Mao Zhen was silent for a while, then opened his mouth to refute. He obviously did not believe that Rong Xiu had the strength to do so. Actually, Rong Xiu had expected all of Rong Xiu's reactions. He took a step forward, his expression calm and indifferent. The Great Phoenix Dragon race can't do it, but it doesn't mean that I can't. At this moment, only one thought flashed through Mao Zhen's mind. Arrogant. Instead, he laughed and said, "Oh? Then tell me, what ability and confidence do you have to make me believe you?" Rong Xiu raised his hand. A cluster of golden flames gushed out from his palm. The surrounding temperature instantly rose by a lot. Mao Zhen's expression froze as he stared at the flames. You probably don't know, but the first one to condense the residual blood you left in the cave on Seven Lotus Mountain was not Ziqin, but me. Of course, Ziqin could also do this, but he was one step ahead. Hearing this, Mao Zhen's expression finally changed. Rong Xiu continued. Also, when you and I came, we accidentally stepped on the jade disc used for testing at the 1000 summit. But you don't have to worry, I have completely repaired it. Speaking of this, the corners of his lips curled into a smile. What I said just now is all true. I wonder if this is enough to convince you. Of course, Mao Zhen did not doubt the truth of Rong Xiu's words. Those who could do these two things were not ordinary people. Moreover, the truth would be known with a simple investigation. There was really no need to lie. Then, did he really have the ability? Mao Zhen was silent for a long time before he said, "Even if I believe you, what do you plan to do? You have to know that in this world, there is no fiend beast skeleton that can replace the great phoenix dragon and help it reconstruct its physical body." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1756. Zi Chen might be able to use the wings of the great phoenix dragon to rebuild his body and even increase his own strength. But the great phoenix dragon was different. The great phoenix dragon was an ancient divine beast with the noblest bloodline power in the world. If he were to borrow the skeletons of other magical beasts, the skeletons would probably shatter before he could do anything. The only one who could compete with it was the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, which had a completely different bloodline. It was even more impossible. It was also because of this that Mao Zhen did not have much hope in this matter. Rong Xiu said, "You forgot one thing. Zi Chen's body only fused with 2 wings. The rest of the skeleton is still in Yu's hands." Mao Zhen was shocked and looked at Chu Luyue. "You actually have a complete set of the great phoenix dragon skeleton?" Chu Luyue coughed. Although she won this fair and square back then, Mao Zhen was still a great phoenix dragon. It felt a little strange to say this in front of him. But in the end, she still forced herself to tell Mao Zhen what happened back then. To Chu Luyue's surprise, Mao Zhen didn't fly into a rage after hearing this. Instead, she sized Chu Luyue up in shock. "No wonder the crimson gold heavenly phoenix and the three-eyed eagle contracted with you. It seems that you are really capable." Chu Luyue did not know whether to laugh or cry. She did not expect that Mao Zhen's focus would be on this after she said so much. "You're not angry?" Mao Zhen waved her hand. "What's there to be angry about? If you want to be angry, you should be angry at Mao Yao." Anyone who was reasonable would know that it was Mao Yao's fault that this matter had blown up to this point. If it weren't for his carelessness, Chu Luyue wouldn't have been his match back then, much less win him. It was only because he was too proud and arrogant that he was tricked. No matter what, he was already so old and an elder of the clan. How could he be so brainless? Mao Zhen's attitude made Chu Luyue secretly relieved. In any case, Mao Zhen was much more reasonable and easier to communicate with than Mao Yao and Mao Yang. "You want me to use that skeleton?" Upon hearing this, Mao Zhen had already guessed Rong Xiu's plan. Rong Xiu nodded. "Although 2 wing bones are missing, the entire skeleton is still there. Although the bloodline power in it has almost been emptied, you still have a portion of bloodline power left in the mountain walls of 7 Lotus Peak. It just so happens that you can use it." In this way, the major problems were basically solved. Of course, the level of this skeleton is definitely not comparable to your original body. After reconstructing your physical body, I'm afraid that your strength will be greatly reduced. Rong Xiu rationally and objectively analyzed the pros and cons of this matter, and clearly explained it to Mao Zhen. Generally speaking, there were pros and cons. However, this was already enough to shock Mao Zhen. He said that he had never thought of reconstructing his physical body, but how could he really not have thought of it at all? Even he himself didn't know how he had endured the long years he had been trapped in here. Loneliness, emptiness. He wanted to leave this place. He wanted to take revenge on Mao Yang. He wanted to take back everything that belonged to him. How proud he was in the past, how strong was his desire to go out. However, he knew better than anyone how slim this hope was. Thus, gradually, his heart turned cold, and he suppressed all these thoughts in the depths of his heart. Many times, he felt that he was just a lonely soul, a lamp that had run out of oil at some point in time. Once he died, everything would be over. But, in the end, he was still unwilling. Therefore, at this moment, when he heard Rong Xiu's words, he could not help but feel a storm in his heart. Endless joy surged up, almost drowning him. Even if his level was lower and his strength was weakened, so what? As long as he could reconstruct his physical body, he could completely leave this place. Everything that he once wanted, he would get it. What could be better than this? Mao Zhen took a deep breath, then said word by word, if you can really help me reconstruct my physical body, then in the future, if you need anything, as long as you ask, Mao Zhen, will do my best. Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curved into a perfect smile. Deal. He did as he said. Chu Luiyue took out the skeleton. The bloodline power inside had almost been completely extracted, so at this time, even the bones were a little dim. Zichen stepped forward and flapped his wings. Whoosh, a fist-sized ball of blood appeared in front of him. Rong Xiu stood in front of the skeleton and raised his hand gently. A golden flame flew out and gently enveloped the ball of blood. Under the control of the flame, the ball of blood flew in front of him, which was also right in front of the skeleton's dragon head. Then, Rong Xiu held his breath and focused his mind, then pointed his finger. Bang! With a loud explosion, the ball of blood instantly split open and transformed into countless sparks that flew toward the skeleton. The sparks burned and soon enveloped the entire skeleton. At the same time, the blood gradually merged with the skeleton. As time passed, the bloodline power contained in the blood also began to merge with the skeleton. The originally dim skeleton began to emit a lustrous light again. A faint pressure spread out from it. Chu Luiyue was secretly shocked by Rong Xiu's strength when he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He turned his head to look at Zichen, only to see spots of starlight flickering on its wings. More importantly, the aura on its body began to rise at an astonishing speed. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1757. Chu Luiyue was stunned. What was going on? Zichen seemed to be surprised as well. A hint of bewilderment flashed across the depths of his usually deep and indifferent eyes. Mao Zhen glanced over and was stunned at first. Then, she laughed. I almost forgot about this. Your body has fused with the two wing bones of this skeleton. Although they have been separated, there is still a certain connection between them. Therefore, when the power of this skeleton begins to increase, the aura of your wing bones will also increase. Chu Luiyue blinked. She seemed to understand. In that case, if the power contained in the skeleton continues to increase, then Zichen's strength will also increase? Mao Zhen nodded. Theoretically speaking, that is indeed the case. However, the wing bones no longer belong to this skeleton, so the increase should be limited. Chu Luiyue sucked in a cold breath. She had guessed correctly. If that was really the case, then Zichen could be said to have picked up an enormous bargain. So what if the increase was limited? But in the end, it still rose. Moreover, this skeleton would belong to Mao Zhen in the future. He was a great phoenix dragon. Moreover, he was a phoenix with top-notch talent and strength. Being able to benefit from his glory was something that many people could not even dream of. Now, Zichen had encountered it. How could this not make her excited? Chu Luiyue looked at Zichen and saw a trace of emotion in his eyes. Of course, Zichen also knew that this was a rich and amazing surprise for him. Previously, he had rejected Mao Zhen's proposal because he had his own principles. However, even he had to admit that it was indeed a great loss for him. Although he did not regret his decision, there were always regrets. He never expected that in the end, because of the wing bones, he would be connected to Mao Zhen again. According to Mao Zhen, he could not only maintain his identity and bloodline, but also have a shortcut to become stronger. As long as Mao Zhen became stronger, his side would be affected, and his own strength would increase as well. Was there anything better than this in the world? Mao Zhen sighed. That's why I said we were fated to meet. There was probably no other such thing in the world. Even if you don't want an opportunity bestowed by the heavens, in the end, it will still fall into your hands through various means. Chu Luiyue was so shocked that he was speechless for a long time. Suddenly, Dumpling tugged at her sleeve. Chu Luiyue lowered his head to look at her. "What's wrong, Dumpling?" Dumpling bit her hand and looked at Zichen, then at Chu Luiyue. Is what you said just now true?" Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh and gently pinch her chubby little face. Since Senior Mao Jin said it himself, it's naturally true. Moreover, Zichen was her contracted magical beast, so she was the most sensitive to the changes in him. This was a foregone conclusion. Dumpling couldn't help but frown with a worried look. She stammered for a long time before saying, then won't he be more powerful than me in the future?" She scrunched up her little face and looked really worried. Chu Luiyue almost couldn't help laughing out loud. "So you were thinking about this problem for a long time just now?" "Yes." Dumpling pouted. In the past, she couldn't defeat Zichen. It was only when she became a crimson gold celestial phoenix that she finally won. Whether it was in terms of bloodline or strength, she was superior to Zichen. But now, Zichen's body had merged with the power of the great phoenix dragon's bloodline, and he had joined forces with Mao Zhen. In the future, with Mao Zhen's support, Zichen's strength would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. Then, wouldn't she have no advantage at all? Chu Luiyue looked at her angry face and couldn't help laughing. He almost forgot that Dumpling and Zichen didn't have a good relationship. Apart from the critical moments when they were fighting the enemy together, the two of them basically didn't communicate much. Of course, it was usually Dumpling who was nagging about fighting, and Zichen who ignored her. It was really annoyed by Tuanzi's noise that it took action without hesitation. But it didn't happen often. Now, Dumpling and Zichen were almost evenly matched. If they really fought, it was hard to say who would win and who would lose. Actually, this is a very simple problem. If Zichen becomes stronger, you can also become stronger, right? Chu Luiyue said with a smile. Anyway, you're so talented. It should be very easy for you to do this, right? When Dumpling heard this, she felt that it made sense. That's right. If Zichen had become more powerful, then she only needed to become more powerful. No matter what, she had to be the one that IU liked the most. Yes. I can definitely win. Hearing this, Zichen glanced over. Sensing its gaze, Dumpling clenched her small fists and raised her small face, looking as if she was ready to fight at any time. Zichen's eyes moved slightly. Then, without saying anything, it turned its head and closed its eyes. Its aura rose again. Dumpling was so angry that her teeth itched. Become stronger? Who didn't know how to? When she got out of here, she would definitely find Zichen and have a good fight. Time passed silently. The flames on the skeleton gradually subsided. The place where the flames disappeared had become as clear and moist as jade. Vaguely, a transparent liquid could be seen flowing slowly inside. That was the power of Mao Zhen's bloodline that had been contained in the blood bead. When the last cluster of golden flames disappeared, Rong Xiu looked up. Senior Mao Zhen, please, mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1758. Mao Zhen took a deep breath and took a step forward. His illusory body formed by the white mist left the lake and walked to the top of the skeleton lying quietly by the lake. Without any hesitation, he entered the skeleton. The white mist spread and soon enveloped the skeleton. Rong Xiu took action at the same time. He shouted. Chu Luiyue immediately understood and took out many herbs from her Qian Kun ring. Boom! She threw out a reddish gold flame and quickly put the herbs into it. In a short while, she had thrown in hundreds of herbs. If an ordinary person were to look at it like this, they would probably be dazzled and find it difficult to distinguish. However, Chu Luiyue's movements were smooth and straightforward. After a while, the herbs were refined one by one. A rich and slightly bitter medicinal aroma spread out from it. Helping Mao Zhen to reconstruct his body was an extremely long process. In this process, many herbs had to be added in at different times. To ensure that the process was foolproof, Rong Xiu was in charge of the refining of the skeleton and left the matter of the herbs to Chu Luiyue. Rong Xiu had already told her the herbs she needed. Fortunately, Chu Luiyue had all of them, so it was much more convenient. Purple beard vine, Mingjue, Wuyo fruit. When it was almost time, Rong Xiu gestured to Chu Luiyue to put in the herbs. Chu Luiyue waved her hand, and the 3 herbs that had already been refined in the fire quickly and lightly fell into the golden fire. Spirit-severing herb. Blackhead herb. Heavenly pangolin. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. They had always been in sync with each other, so their cooperation was perfect. Without Rong Xiu's detailed explanation, Chu Luiyue knew the different herbs and the steps to be refined. She could always put in the herbs at the most suitable time. Rong Xiu, on the other hand, had been staring at the skeleton in front of him since the beginning. He did not even raise his head. He knew that no one could do it better than her. Although the whole process was complicated and consumed a lot of energy and spirit, the two of them worked together and shared a lot of the burden. It was precisely because of this that things progressed more smoothly than expected. The aura of the skeleton continued to grow stronger. At the same time, the light on Zichen's wings shone even brighter. It closed its eyes. For some reason, every part of its body began to ache. At first, it wasn't too obvious, but as time passed, the pain became more and more obvious. Zichen knew very well that the pain wasn't because of any danger, nor was it a sign of trouble. It had a conjecture in its mind, but it felt that it was too absurd. Thus, it just stood there, allowing the pain in its body to gradually increase until its body began to tremble slightly. Dumpling soon saw this scene. She had been thinking about how to prevent Zichen from overtaking her. Most of her attention was on it, so she quickly noticed that something was wrong with Zichen. She was taken aback and hurriedly ran over. You. What's wrong with you? Although she had always regarded Zichen as a rival and wanted to defeat it, she couldn't help but worry when she saw it like this. Zichen opened its eyes. I'm fine. Dumpling widened her eyes and looked it up and down. Fine? It doesn't look fine at all. Although Zichen's aura was still growing, it looked like it was in pain. I'm really fine. Seeing that Dumpling was still standing in front of it, Zichen repeated itself. This time, it emphasized its tone. After all, Zichen had lived for thousands of years longer than Dumpling. It knew very well what to emphasize at this moment to make Dumpling calm down. Sure enough, Dumpling shrank its neck when it heard this. Then I'll stay here and watch you. Dumpling turned her head and glanced at Chu Luiyue. Yu was at a critical juncture and couldn't be distracted. If something happened to Zichen, it would definitely affect her. Therefore, for Yu's sake, she had to make sure that Zichen was fine. Zichen glanced at her. She had always liked to go against it. Today's situation was rare. Dumpling felt a little strange being stared at. She immediately puffed out her chest and raised her head. What are you looking at? I'm still waiting for you to be my little brother. Zichen closed its eyes again. Some people really shouldn't have any illusions. The pain in its body was still increasing. But this time, Zichen's body didn't tremble anymore. It swallowed all the pain and torment it had to endure. On the surface, it seemed to be much better than before. Seeing this scene, Dumpling was relieved and began to wait patiently at the side. Bang! The door opened, and a figure flew out. In the blink of an eye, it appeared in front of everyone. The people who had been waiting in the square for a long time were all excited because of this. Look! The last one has finally come out. It's going to be a month soon. To be able to stay in there for so long, he must have obtained a top inheritance, right? I guessed so. The first place of the 1,000-peak summit. How enviable. Everyone was discussing animatedly, but they obviously had great hopes for the last young man to come out. Mao Yang stood up and took a few steps forward. Mao Su. Hearing the voice, Mao Su immediately cupped his fists and bowed respectfully to Mao Yang. "Greetings, Patriarch." Mao Yang smiled and asked, "No need to be so polite. You're the last one to come out of this thousand-peak summit. You did well." Hearing this, Mao Su straightened up with an undisguised high-spirited look on his face. "Thank you for your praise, Patriarch." Seeing Zhang Xian's reaction, the crowd knew that their conjecture was correct. He must have obtained a very good inheritance. Mao Yang raised his leg and walked in front of Mao Su. Standing here, he could clearly feel that Mao Su's aura had indeed improved greatly. He nodded in satisfaction and patted Mao Su's shoulder. "You're very good." He did not ask Mao Su which ancestor's inheritance he had obtained. This was the rule of the Thousand Peak Summit. Everyone would be able to make a rough guess based on the changes in their auras, and from there, determine their ranking. That was already enough. Unless they were willing to take the initiative to say, others could not ask. Therefore, although everyone was curious as to what kind of inheritance Mao Su had obtained, no one tactfully asked. Mao Yang praised him a few more times before saying, "Since everyone has come out, then the Thousand Peak Summit is considered to have ended successfully." Everyone cheered in unison. Mao Yang smiled and looked at the elders at the side. "I'll have to trouble you to close the Great Void Temple with me. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network." Chapter 1759. A few elders followed Mao Yang and walked forward. Mao Yang stood in front of the door. He held his breath and raised his arms. The power around him began to surge. A dazzling stream of light flew out from his fingertips. The other elders also attacked together. Soon, numerous streams of light gathered. They formed a strange pattern in midair. It was the totem of the great phoenix dragon tribe. "Seal!" Mao Yang shouted and pushed the totem out. The huge and bright totem began to fly slowly toward the door. Soon, the totem landed on the door. Buzz! A solemn and sacred buzzing sound came from the Great Void Temple. Everyone in the square bowed their heads in respect. However, at this moment, Mao Yang suddenly realized that something was wrong. The totem did not merge with the door. He frowned and secretly increased his power. However, the totem remained suspended an inch in front of the door and refused to move forward. It was as if there was an invisible barrier blocking the totem outside the door. Mao Yang felt uneasy. Such a situation had never happened before. Soon, the other elders also noticed this strange scene and frowned. "What's going on? The door of the Great Void Temple can't be closed? In the past, we've worked together to close the door. This has never happened before. What's going on this time? Could it be someone hasn't come out yet?" The words of a white-haired elder attracted everyone's attention and made Mao Yang's heart skip a beat. He turned his head to look at the elder. "Elder Fushan, what do you mean by this?" Elder Fushan was an elder in the tribe and his seniority was much higher than Mao Yang's. He was a highly respected elder in the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe. There's only one possibility for the Great Void Temple's door to refuse to close. There's still someone inside. There had been a similar situation in the past. The door wouldn't close no matter how hard they tried. Later, when they investigated, they found out that they had missed a person inside. It wasn't until a few days later when that person walked out that everything was completed smoothly. Mao Fushan stroked his beard. "In my opinion, why don't we check in this direction?" Mao Yang heaved a sigh of relief and turned to give instructions. "Check the people who came out earlier again." The people below quickly agreed. Yes. However, some elders were still frowning. Because they clearly remembered that everyone had already come out, and Mao Su was indeed the last one. Logically speaking, there should be no one left in the Great Void Temple. Not long after, those who had entered the Great Void Temple were all gathered and counted by the two elders. However, after checking, they found that the number of people was indeed correct. Clan head, everyone who has entered the Great Void Temple is already here at the Thousand Peak Summit. No one was left out. The elder in charge of counting the number of people braced himself and said. Everyone's expression changed. Even Mao Yang's heart sank. He suddenly raised his eyes and looked at the Great Void Temple again. There was someone else inside, but he didn't know about it. By the lake. The forest was shady, the water rippled, and everything was tranquil. Chu Luiyue raised his wrist and sent out the last medicinal ingredient. A handful of crimson-red sand lightly fell into the burning golden flame beside him. Boom! The flame burned even more fiercely. Vaguely, one could already see that the bones were gradually growing muscles and flesh. Although Chu Luiyue had previously helped Zichen reconstruct his physical body, he was still shocked when he saw Rong Xiu make a move. At that time, Zichen had only borrowed 2 wing bones of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon, and she had almost exhausted all her strength. Now, what Rong Xiu wanted to reconstruct was the real Great Void Phoenix Dragon. Rong Xiu's expression was calm. The golden flame was reflected in his eyes, and the fire was burning brightly. The effects of all the medicinal ingredients had gradually seeped into the skeleton. The rich and slightly bitter medicinal fragrance was mixed with a faint smell of blood. After an unknown period of time, a purple-gold phosphorescent light flashed through the flame. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. That was the scales of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon. Had he finally reached the final stage? Almost at the same time, Chu Luiyue heard a scream behind him. Screech! She was shocked and immediately looked back. However, she was shocked to see that a purple gold light had torn apart Zichen's wings and broken out of his body. Then, it enveloped his entire body. Zichen! Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. She could feel that Zichen was in great pain at this moment. However, she could not stop him. Dumpling was also shocked by this scene. Her eyes widened in a daze. What happened just now? Zichen's wings, she subconsciously looked at Chu Luiyue. Ah, you. Zichen, he's fine. Chu Luiyue pulled Dumpling over, patted her head, and comforted her softly. He'll be fine in a while. Hearing Lin Mengya's firm tone, Tuanzi's beating heart finally settled down. When she saw that scene just now, it really gave her a fright. Chu Luiyue touched her face and smiled. Dumpling, I didn't expect you to care so much about Zichen. Only then did Tuanzi remember her position and immediately said, of course. If something happened to him, wouldn't you be very sad? Besides, I'm still waiting to be his big sister. Chu Luiyue's heart was filled with warmth. Dumpling was lively and pure. Although she liked to put on a brave front, she was always very kind to her people. Usually, she liked to cause trouble for Zichen. However, when it mattered, she still cared about Zichen. However, it would be a little difficult for her to be Zichen's big sister. Chu Luiyue's eyes turned slightly and looked at Zichen again, who was enveloped by the purple gold light. Although the process was painful, as long as he could get through this, Zichen, boom. A loud sound actually came from the sky. An extremely dangerous aura was rapidly approaching. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat and she looked up. However, he heard a deep and fierce voice coming from afar. Who dares to trespass into the Temple of the Void? Come out. Chu Luiyue frowned. Mao Yang. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1760. Mao Yang's figure did not appear. Chu Luiyue remembered clearly that Mao Zhen had said that the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe usually only had one chance to enter this place in their lifetime. Obviously, Mao Yang could not enter. But even so, Mao Yang should be waiting outside the Great Void Temple with his people. He wanted to force them out. Chu Luiyue turned around to take a look. Everything had reached the final stage. It was the most crucial moment. Rong Xiu could not be distracted. They had to continue to stay here until Mao Zhen's body was officially completed. Boom! Another sound was heard. It was so loud that it numbed everyone. It was as if someone was holding a giant hammer and hammering it from the outside. Do you really think that you can hide here forever? Come out. Mao Yang's voice was no longer as gentle as usual. Instead, it was filled with ferocity and madness. Chu Luiyue looked at the sky and sneered. Someone had quietly entered the Great Void Temple and even the coiling dragon pillar. This was no different from slapping Mao Yang, the tribe leader, hard in the face. It was expected that he would be so flustered and exasperated. Of course, they would go out, but not now. Chu Luiyue raised his hand. Countless silver-red stars flew out like a river of stars and spread out. Soon, the few people within the radius, including the lake, were enveloped in Chu Luiyue's god territory. The commotion outside was instantly isolated. Chu Luiyue began to wait calmly. The Great Void Temple's door was locked. There was dead silence in the main hall. A few people stood in front of the coiling dragon pillar. At the front was Mao Yang, whose face was extremely ugly. Standing behind him in a row were the elders of the clan. Other than a few elders who stayed outside to calm the crowd, the rest of the elders who participated in the Thousand Summit had all arrived. It was a matter of great importance. They had to come. Everyone fell into a deathly silence as they looked at the few specks of light floating on the coiling dragon pillar. The air seemed to have frozen. Mao Yang clenched his fists. He was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. It turned out that not only did someone sneak in, there was more than one person. This was simply tearing his face and dignity to shreds and ruthlessly trampling on the ground. How are you guys guarding the Great Void Temple? How can you not know when someone came in? He turned around and yelled at the elders. The elders looked at each other in dismay as cold sweat broke out all over their bodies. Mao Yang rarely got angry. Even when Mao Yao made such a big mistake and caused the ancestors' bones to be unable to be returned to the clan, he didn't do anything to Mao Yao. This time, it was obvious that he had used his true energy. In the silence, Miao Fushan spoke up. Patriarch, we haven't found out how this happened yet. I'm afraid it's not appropriate to convict him at this time. Mao Yang closed his eyes and tried his best to suppress the anger in his heart. Elder Fushan, I know what you mean. However, the Great Void Temple is the most sacred and important place in our tribe. Now that something like this has happened, it is precisely because it happened in the Great Void Temple that the clan leader has to remain calm. Miao Fushan advised patiently. The Great Void Temple has always been guarded very strictly. After the Millennium Summit began, everyone was even more vigilant and didn't dare to relax. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, all of us were in the square and no one noticed this. It's clear that the other party came prepared and moved very stealthily, deceiving all of us. Mao Yang was also there. He didn't notice anything either. If not for the fact that they couldn't close the door in the end, who knew when they would have found out about this? Therefore, this couldn't be blamed on the elders. Mao Yang took a deep breath. Miao Fushan's words were reasonable. Moreover, he was very senior, so Mao Yang naturally had to be more polite. If he ordered Miao Fushan around like this, he would really be crazy. You're right. I was impulsive. Miao Fushan shook his head. Patriarch is also worried about the clan. Mao Yang looked at the coiling dragon pillar again and frowned. Who the hell are these people? Where did they come from? After realizing that something was wrong, they quickly came in and checked almost the entire Great Void Temple. There was nothing strange. Everything was exactly the same as when they first arrived. Patriarch, could it be that someone tore through space and came here? Miao Fushan pondered for a moment and asked. Mao Yang nodded thoughtfully. This was the most likely possibility. Moreover, I have a feeling that the people who came in aren't from the clan. Miao Fushan pointed at the stars on the coiling dragon pillar. Look, this color is really wrong. When the great void phoenix dragon clansmen entered the coiling dragon pillar, they all appeared the same color. However, these people had different colors and were completely different from them. Mao Yang's eyelids twitched violently. If they weren't from the clan, then, they were outsiders? But Divine Dragon Island was heavily guarded and didn't allow anyone to enter easily. How? No. Mao Yang suddenly thought of something and his expression changed abruptly. Rong Xiao and Shengguan, you were also on Divine Dragon Island. He immediately said. Quick. Go and check 7 Lotus Peak. See if those two are still there. The elders looked at each other in surprise, and then they quickly understood what was going on. Did the patriarch mean that the two of them were suspicious? Yes. I'll go now. One of the elders nodded and turned to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, Mao Yang followed with a gloomy expression. Forget it. I'll go personally. He really didn't feel at ease letting others go to 7 Lotus Peak. Elder Fushan, I'll leave this place to you for now. Mao Fushan nodded. Given the current situation, it might really be those 2 people. It would be good for the patriarch to go personally. Mao Yang strode away and disappeared quickly. 7 Lotus Peak. It was quiet and everything was as usual. One of the guards craned his neck and looked in the direction of the Temple of the Void. He asked curiously, didn't the last person come out just now? Why is there no movement now? Logically speaking, everyone should have left after the 1000 Summit ended. However, it had been a while, but it was still quiet. The other guard said. Maybe there are other things that haven't been settled? After all, the 1000 Summit is only held once in so many years. Before he finished speaking, the two of them saw a figure flying toward them from afar. The aura was awe-inspiring and imposing. It was actually, greetings, Patriarch. Seeing the face of the person who came, the 2 guards were shocked and hurriedly bowed. Mao Yang's face seemed to be covered with a layer of ice. Where are Rong Xiao and Shengguan Yu? The 2 of them were stunned. They're still inside. Mao Yang knew that it was meaningless to continue asking. He waved his sleeves, opened the barrier, and flashed in. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1761. He was so fast that he disappeared in front of the 2 guards in the blink of an eye. What's going on? The 2 people who were left behind were at a loss. One of the guards asked. Why is the patriarch here all of a sudden? And, he doesn't look well. He had never seen the patriarch so angry before. Could it be that the 2 of them are getting impatient because they haven't made a move for so long? The other guard frowned and suddenly realized something. Oh no. Something's happened at 7 Lotus Peak. At that moment, he did not care about anything else. He moved his feet and chased after Mao Yang. The remaining guards hurriedly followed after him. Hey, what's going on? Wait for me. Mao Yang arrived at 7 Lotus Peak and went straight to the cave halfway up the mountain. As soon as he arrived at the entrance of the cave and saw the burn marks on the edges, his eyelids twitched violently. He quickly walked in. When the 2 guards arrived, Mao Yang's figure had already disappeared from the cave. The 2 guards looked at each other, but did not dare to step in. They could only wait outside in torment. The guard, who was still a little confused at first, vaguely realized that something very serious must have happened. His face was pale, and his voice trembled. What could have happened? During this period of time, we have been diligently guarding this place, day and night without rest. If there was really an accident, we should have noticed it at all. The other guard did not say anything, but there was a hint of panic and fear in his eyes. The patriarch's reaction was too obvious. If anything happened, they, as guards, would be the first to bear the brunt of it. At this time, times seemed to be particularly unbearable. After an unknown period of time, Mao Yang finally walked out of the cave. Seeing his current expression, the two guards' hearts sank. Mao Yang put his hands behind his back and looked coldly at the two guards. "Where are they?" he asked. Hearing this, the two guards were confused. What does this mean? They're gone. Rong Xiao and Sheng Guanyu escaped. Mao Yang finally could not hold back and shouted. "I'm asking you, where are they?" This finally brought them back to their senses. Plop. The two of them knelt down together. "Patriarch, we really don't know what happened. If they noticed anything, how could they not report it?" Mao Yang gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. Of course, he knew that the two of them didn't know anything. But this was what infuriated him the most. They were definitely the ones who had snuck into the Great Void Temple. These two people had actually toyed with their entire clan in the palm of their hands. The two guards were trembling all over. It was obvious that after making such a huge mistake, even if they didn't die, they would lose a layer of skin. During this period of time, you really didn't notice anything wrong? Mao Yang asked, unwilling to give up. One of the guards suddenly remembered something. Oh, right. A few days ago, there seemed to have been a faint fluctuation in Seven Lotus Mountain. However, because the commotion was very small and disappeared very quickly, we only thought that it was the two of them causing trouble and didn't take it to heart. His voice became softer and softer as a deep sense of despair filled his heart. At this moment, even they themselves realized that it was a huge mistake on their part. Just because of a moment of carelessness, those two escaped. This was irrefutable. Mao Yang was so angry that he laughed. Now, it seemed that the commotion was really caused by those two. It was very likely that they had already escaped from Seven Lotus Mountain and went to the Great Void Temple. Mao Yang looked at the two of them coldly. There seemed to be a fire burning in his chest, almost driving him crazy. The two of them also sensed the danger and were about to speak. "Clan, Chi." Mao Yang raised his hand and a light blade flew out. It directly pierced through one of the guards' chest. Poof! Bright red blood quickly gushed out from his chest. As for himself, his eyes were bulging out of their sockets. There was deep fear in his eyes. He was already dead. When the other person saw this scene, he was shocked to the core. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan was not allowed to casually kill their own clan members. Even if they committed a grave mistake and needed to be executed, they had to go through the trial of the elders. Why did the clan leader directly kill them? He looked at Mao Yang and suddenly realized that the clan leader's usually gentle face had become crazy and ferocious at this moment. He knew that this was not good and turned to run. However, just as he took a step, the light blade quickly attacked from behind. It directly cut him in half at the waist. He immediately stopped in his tracks. After a short stalemate, his body fell heavily to the ground and stopped breathing. In the blink of an eye, the two of them were killed by Mao Yang. Mao Yang's expression was cold. With a flick of his sleeve, the two corpses quickly burned. In the blink of an eye, the two corpses turned into ashes and scattered with the wind. Even the bloodstains on the ground were burned to ashes. Mao Yang looked back, and a trace of haze flashed in his eyes. Then, he moved his feet and instantly disappeared from the spot. Great Void Temple. In the main hall, everyone was waiting in silence. After some time, the door opened and Mao Yang walked in again. He walked hurriedly, his expression was cold, and his body seemed to be wrapped in frost. Seeing his expression, everyone's heart sank. Mao Fushan frowned, stepped forward, and asked. "Clan leader, how is the situation?" Mao Yang stood in front of the coiling dragon pillar with a cold smile. The Rong Xiao duo had already secretly left Seven Lotus Peak a long time ago. The ones inside, must be them. The atmosphere in the main hall became even more tense. Seven Lotus Peak is heavily guarded. How did the guards do it? Mao Yang's expression was indifferent. They have already committed suicide to atone for their crimes. All of the elders were shocked. The members of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan were all very proud. To them, committing suicide was not something to be proud of. Therefore, almost no one would choose to end their own lives in this way. Mao Fushan was also stunned. Then, where are their corpses? Mao Yang sighed. They died of self-mutilation and did not leave behind a skeleton. Several elders gasped in shock. Mao Fushan's old face twitched, and he finally sighed. What a pity, although this is serious, it is not to this extent, not even a skeleton was left behind. Their names would be erased from the clan records. They would not even be able to think about it in the future. This could definitely be considered as the most tragic punishment. Mao Yang looked down. At that time, I was thinking about Rong Xiao and didn't pay attention, so, forget it. What's done is done. Mao Fushan turned around and looked at the coiling dragon pillar. The most important thing now is to get them out of here. Mao Yang nodded. I will do it myself. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1762. As he spoke, he walked up to the coiling dragon pillar and raised his right hand. Purplish gold scales quickly appeared and covered the back of his hand. The scales were sharp and reflected a cold light. Then, he clenched his fist and punched out. Boom! The tyrannical force slammed into the coiling dragon pillar. Kaboom! Another loud sound came from the sky. Chu Luiyue looked up. The commotion had stopped for a while. She thought that Mao Yang and the others must have discovered something. As expected, Mao Yang's voice came. Rong Xiao. Shengguan Yu. How dare you? Chu Luiyue smirked. She knew that this matter would not be kept a secret for long. Mao Yang was not stupid. He would understand everything if he went to the 7 Lotus Peaks. However, they could not go out yet. She looked around. Mao Zhen's body had mostly recovered. She estimated that it would take some time for it to be fully healed. Before that, she had to make sure that Rong Xiao would not be affected by the outside world. Otherwise, it would be a big loss if everything went to waste. Chu Luiyue held her breath and strengthened the divine territory around her. In the Taishu temple, Mao Yang looked at the unresponsive coiling dragon pillar. The anger in his heart was about to burst out of his chest. His eyes were dyed with a trace of blood. Patriarch, it seems that they are determined to stay inside. Mao Fushan shook his head. We are outside, and they are inside. Unless they come out of their own accord, it will be difficult for us to force them out. The coiling dragon pillar contained the power of their ancestors. It was sacred and unshakable. Even if everyone here worked together, they would not be able to do anything. In the current situation, they could only wait. Mao Yang did not say anything. Another elder said in a low voice, Strange. Strange. The two of them are humans. Logically speaking, they shouldn't even be able to enter this hall. How did they manage to enter the coiling dragon pillar without anyone noticing? His question immediately attracted the attention of others. That's right. Aren't we the only ones who can enter here? It is not easy for our own people to enter the coiling dragon pillar, let alone humans. How did they do it? Let's not talk about anything else. These two people are really strange, Mao Yang sneered. Isn't it simple? Don't forget that Shengguan Yu has an ancestor skeleton. As for the legendary three-eyed eagle, it had even used its bones to reconstruct its body. With this layer of relationship, what was so strange about them being able to enter the coiling dragon pillar? Everyone was silent. They had underestimated the strength of those two people and thought that as long as they locked them up, everything would be fine. Who would have thought that they had such a skill? Mao Fushan asked. Patriarch. If they were to continue waiting like this, it would be too depressing. A biting cold pressure and killing intent came over from all directions. Chu Luiyue instantly understood something. Mao Yang and the others had made a move after all. Even if they could not enter here, they still had other means to deal with them. Chu Luiyue looked at Rongxiu. In front of him, Mao Zhen's body was almost complete. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1763. Chu Luiyue made a prompt decision and looked at Dumpling. Dumpling had a tacit understanding with her and immediately nodded with a determined expression. Then, she took a step forward and waved her hand. Reddish gold flames instantly rose. They formed a circle around everyone. The trees were still collapsing, and the layer of black shadow continued to push forward, destroying everything in its path. Only then did Chu Luiyue see clearly that it was a purplish-black fog with faint golden stars within. An indescribable sense of oppression came from all directions. Soon, the purplish-black fog collided with the reddish-gold flames. Boom! The two forces collided and intertwined. In an instant, sparks flew everywhere. Dumpling's face turned pale. This demon-slaying formation gathered the power of several great phoenix dragon elders, so Dumpling was naturally not its match. Chu Luiyue mobilized the force in her body and injected it, causing the flames to surge. The purplish-black fog finally stopped, and the two sides entered a stalemate. Chu Luiyue's heart was in her mouth. She and Dumpling were probably not this thing's match. They might barely be able to hold on for a while, but it was impossible for them to last longer. She didn't know if they could wait until Mao Zhen's body was completely reconstructed. At this moment, the purplish-black fog seemed to have sensed the obstruction in front of it and rapidly condensed. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and saw that the fog had formed Mao Yang's appearance. His appearance and figure were exactly the same as the real Mao Yang. However, his eyes were empty, as if he was a stiff puppet. He opened his mouth, and the voice that came out was also Mao Yang's threatening voice. Rongxiu, Shangguanyu, do you really want to go against my great phoenix dragon race to the end? This voice was very gloomy, completely different from when he first saw them. It could be seen that Mao Yang had completely lost his patience and had a strong killing intent towards them. Chu Luiyue didn't care about this. From the very beginning, Mao Yang had never thought of having a good talk with them. He had always been high and mighty, never putting them in his eyes. From then on, Chu Luiyue knew that Mao Yang harbored deep enmity towards them. Now, it was just that he could no longer pretend. Chu Luiyue smiled. Patriarch Mao Yang, we were just bored at 7 Lotus Mountain and came out to take a look. Why are you in such a hurry? When we've had enough fun, we'll naturally go out. Chu Luiyue's voice rang out clearly from the coiling dragon pillar, echoing throughout the hall. Mao Yang's face darkened. Did he get bored and come out to have a look? What kind of place did they think this was? That they could come and go as they pleased. This Shangguanyu was just like what Mao Yao had said. She was arrogant to the extreme. Mao Yang was so angry that he laughed. Good. Since you want to play, then this patriarch will accompany you to the end. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly sat down on the ground and closed his eyes. A totem flashed between his eyebrows. At the same time, the same totem flashed between the eyebrows of the puppet inside the coiling dragon pillar that looked exactly like Mao Yang. An extremely dangerous aura emanated from its body. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. Then, he saw the puppet stomp heavily on the ground and charge towards them. Without hesitation, Chu Luiyue flew out and chose to fight with it. Chi! A sharp sound pierced through the air. The bright and sharp crimson heaven sword had already appeared in her hand. In the next instant, she charged out of the boundary formed by the red-gold flames and the silver-red divine domain. Ah, you! Tuanzi shouted worriedly, and her little face was full of worry. Chu Luiyue did not turn around and only shouted. Dumpling, take care of the boundary. Leave the rest to her. Although Dumpling was worried, she could not help but nod. The flames in her eyes burned even more fiercely. On the other side, Chu Luyue and the puppet were already engaged in close combat. Crimson Heaven Sword. Chu Luyue held the sword with both hands and quickly slashed it down. The puppet raised its arm, and purplish gold dragon scales gradually appeared on its arm. They were hard and dazzling. Clang! The blade of the sword landed on the dragon's armor with a crisp sound. Crack! A thin crack appeared on the dragon's armor. However, the puppet's expression did not change. In the next instant, purplish-black mist covered the crack, and in the blink of an eye, it was restored to its original state. Chu Liyue's pupils shrank. The puppet's recovery ability was heaven-defying. Mao Yang's voice came from the puppet's mouth. It was sinister, cold, and filled with undisguised mockery. A mere high god is indeed extraordinary to be able to use a supremacy divine artifact. However, this is the best you can do. Even a true supremacy expert would not be a match for him, let alone Sheng Guanyu, who was of an even lower level. Then, the puppet bent its elbow and struck. The sharp and tough armor drew a cold and short arc in the air. Chu Luyue blocked with his sword. Buzz! A force as heavy as a mountain came crashing down. Chu Liyue's chest tightened, and the thick smell of blood instantly spread between his lips and teeth. The cultivation of the great phoenix dragon race was very different from that of the human race. When they devoured the energy of heaven and earth, most of it would fuse into their bones and blood vessels. As a result, their physical strength was usually extremely strong. Therefore, human puppets might be unable to use their original force, resulting in a decrease in their combat strength. However, the great phoenix dragon did not have such concerns at all. For example, although this puppet was not as strong as the Real Mao Yang, it was not much weaker. Especially this puppet, which had gathered the strength of all the elders. Naturally, it was stronger. Chu Liyue's physical combat skills were considered top-notch among cultivators who were also high gods. However, the puppet's attack could still easily injure her. She swallowed the sweet taste between her lips and teeth and passed Scarlet Cloud's sword to her right hand. A black shield appeared in her left hand. Just as she summoned the black shield, the puppet's second punch had already landed. Buzz! The sound of the collision was extremely dull. Chu Liyue's wrist instantly went numb, but fortunately, she managed to block the power of the punch. Her feet had sunk deeply into the ground when she stepped on it. You have a lot of trump cards, but unfortunately, your strength is not enough. These tricks are meaningless. The puppet closed in on Chu Liyue and swiftly landed another punch. The shocking force was greatly reduced by the black shield, but part of it still landed on Chu Liyue's body. Chu Liyue's body flew out uncontrollably. She flipped her palm and stabbed her sword into the ground. Whoosh! Scarlet Cloud's sword drew a deep trench in the ground. Relying on this resistance, Chu Liyue managed to stabilize her body with great difficulty. However, before she could catch her breath, the puppet had already attacked again. Buzz! Several scales flew out from his body and instantly surrounded Chu Liyue. The sharp whistling sound made one's eardrums vibrate. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. They were fearless and dared to do things that others did not dare to do. Moreover, this time, it was Rong Xiao and Sheng Guanyu who made the mistake. In the future, even if the Yuntian Tower and Lingxiao College wanted to cause trouble for them, they would not have a valid reason to do so. Therefore, he had to kill these two people in the next few days. As the puppet walked forward step by step, cracks appeared on the ground. A purplish-black mist spread out. Dumpling looked over anxiously. Her heart was clenched tightly. She wanted to go forward, but she remembered Chu Liyue's instructions. She could only stay where she was and support the barrier around her. Finally, the puppet stopped 3 steps away from Chu Liyue. He reached out and clenched his fist. The black shield was instantly sent flying. Just like that, Chu Luiyue was completely exposed to the other party. She did not run away. Instead, she sat cross-legged with her eyes closed. The blood at the corner of her mouth was red and mournful. It made her face look even paler. The situation did not look good. The puppet was expressionless. He flipped his wrist. A purplish gold whip suddenly appeared in his hand. The shape of the whip was very strange. It was formed by layers of scales. At a glance, it looked like the great phoenix dragon's tail. Die! Mao Yang shouted and lashed out with the whip. It went straight for Chu Luiyue. Wherever the whip passed, the space trembled violently. It was as if it was about to collapse. The strands of hair in front of Chu Luiyue's forehead flew up with the wind. She did not seem to sense the impending danger and remained motionless. In the blink of an eye, the whip was in front of her and was about to land on her body. If the whip landed, she would be crippled even if she did not die. Ah, you! Dumpling widened her eyes and wanted to rush over. Rong Xiu's palm moved slightly, and black flames burned in his eyes. However, at this moment, the sound of a zither suddenly rang out. The sound of the zither was desolate and clanging. Just this sound alone made people feel as if they were in a sea of blood. It was as if an overwhelming killing intent from ancient times had enveloped the entire world. Dumpling retracted the step she had just taken. She widened her grape-like eyes and looked at Chu Luiyue in shock. The thin woman was sitting cross-legged with a straight posture. Her black hair hung down, making her look even thinner. Her face was very pale, as if she would collapse at any moment. However, the pair of eyes that suddenly opened were bright and clear. Her fighting spirit was awe-inspiring. A vast aura that could not be looked down upon quickly spread from her body. At this moment, she raised her hands with her palms facing down. Her jade-like fingertips gently plucked the air, and the sound of the zither rang out again. An inch-long reddish-gold light blade flew out from her hands. Chi! The purplish gold whip was instantly cut in half. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.